Welcome to the Sidebar, a book club for roguish young men. I'm David.
I'm Gabe, the leading Chamberlain fanboy.
And I'm Capitalissimo, and I'm ready to outrage you and every woman I meet on my way across the frontier of America. With us today is the Prudentialist.
Howdy, howdy.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Prude. And we're here to discuss My Confession by Samuel Chamberlain, republished by Dissonant Review. And actually, some of us read a different version, but that's the one we're going to try and discuss since it just came out, I think, sort of late last year. And yeah, this is a little bit of a vanity pick for me. I really wanted to read this at the time it came out. It's actually the book that inspired Blood Meridian. I guess I'll just come out and say I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. I thought it would be more of a me flavor, but it sounds like we all came in pretty hot on this.
It's real good.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. I did say it might be one of my favorite things I've read. It might be in that top 10 fiction and nonfiction. If you put me on a deserted island, this might be one of the ones I would bring. So I guess I would start with a strong, usually we couch a book and saying, read the opening, here are our thoughts. I would say if you're interested in history at all, this is a pretty easy recommendation from me. And then I guess we'll just go around real quick. If you guys had any general highlights and I guess thoughts on the book as it is. The topic of it is just a young man, 16 years old, 15 to 16 years old at the start, over about a 3 to 4 year period, when he leaves home, joins the Mexican-American War as a dragoon, and then about 6 months or a year of his life right after, with a pretty abrupt ending. So it's really the contents of the book. I don't know if you guys had any, I guess, high-level thoughts on the book as it exists.
Yes, definitely. Okay, couple things. If you are into this kind of like pseudo-autobiographical kind of narrative about frontier travels and adventure, then you are in great luck, because this was an extremely popular genre at the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th century. And this is written in a very approachable way that is, definitely elevated over what you would typically see published nowadays, but was basically, newspaper level writing at the time it was published.
Extremely breezy.
Yeah. But, there are this reminded me a lot of T.E. Lawrence's Seven Pillars of Wisdom. Lawrence was an Englishman and lacked the American flair that Samuel Chamberlain had. But, in terms of further reading, like Charles Wilkins Weber also had some really cool adventure, again, pseudo-fictional adventure books that were published around the same times. And Charles Wilkins Weber also is believed by some to be Judge Holden. So, or the inspiration for Judge Holden, though that is obviously not confirmed, because the only historical referent for Judge Holden is this book, My Confession.
How about you, Gabe and Prude? Any, high-level thoughts on the book, just as a book?
Let's do the guest. Prude, you go.
Oh, sure. To me, it was a great... For me, as a history buff, I quite loved the fact that this is an interesting account of the Mexican-American War, which is just greatly overlooked nowadays in contemporary history, despite being one of the most consequential wars in American history in terms of the expansion of the United States in respect to its territorial gains outside of the Louisiana Purchase. And just to see what it was like for a young man and what you were doing in I guess what you would call occupied territory, or just foreign territory, as you were invading Mexico, trying to get to Mexico City, and to see the war itself and all of the interactions with the locals, so to speak, both female and otherwise. It was pretty interesting. But also just he was an incredibly literate young man. This is a 15-year-old who was given a church education, was given books to read other than the Bible that you would find in a church library. So to see him reference Dante's Inferno and other texts throughout here. And this guy's a 15-year-old, but you're seeing still words like, capriciousness and these lustful tyrants, things that we don't really expect a lot of 15-year-olds to say nowadays, and it's a good view into the past, which I quite appreciate. And even I don't know if the Dissident review, so spoiler alert, I haven't bought Alaric's Dissident review version of this My Confession. I have the publication that came out in the 1950s of this via the LibGen. I downloaded the PDF. And again, just the fact that this text has so much of there's so much prose narrative here. Like, even if this were not an autobiographical account, even if some parts are exaggerated, you could pick this up, not know that this was a real account of someone's life who died in 1908 and had fought in the Mexican-American War. You'd think, damn, this is a really great Western. And this is better than anything, Louis L'Amour or any other pulp writer has put out. And you could definitely see why Cormac McCarthy picked this for his inspiration for
He is such a natural storyteller. I got chills during just the ghost story chapter, which is we'll have to cover that when we get to it. It's a really random throwaway chapter, but it's like, wow, this guy, you could just imagine him verbally being like a master storyteller, and it converts really well to the written word.
Yeah, no, he's a fantastic storyteller. Obviously, we picked this out. It was a great choice, actually. I forgot whose idea was My Confessions out of this. We thought
it was me.
It was David.
It was Dave.
Yeah. I just said it was me. Yeah.
This is a long time in the making. We were supposed to do this for a long time. But once you actually pick it up, I got Alaric's. I got both versions. I got the same thing as Prude, and I also got a physical edition. So I read a bit of both. And I gotta say, reading it for the first time, you have an expectation. You got the great cover. You have a real rogue, a real heroic figure. So you expect something like very serious. Of course, you got the McCarthy specter hanging in your head. So you're thinking something deeply like serious and baritone and with weight. And then you read the first 30 pages, and it's a story of a deep, sensitive young man, beating the shit out of guys for daring to, call his sweethearts, hussies, and wants to get married, but sadly can't, and so he
so many times.
So many times.
So many
women
times
want to marry him, but he's too stone cold.
Mexican women, not even once.
So many women
Fate
want to get married.
keeps intervening. Yeah.
The first time when he's 16 years old, he's got like a big titty brunette girlfriend. He beat the shit out of the bully. Even the chaplain's okay with it. He's ready. He's getting married at 16. Of course,
the priest clapped.
All the priests, yes, everyone clapped. There's so many everyone clapped in this. Like, listen, all the battle stuff, he lived a sincere life, but he's as an old man, he definitely put a little bit of pinches of sugar in his telling. Right, especially during the beginning, So her parents tell him to.
Yeah, he put that Professor Brothers spin on his life story and his sexual escapades.
Yeah, Mecha Shiva comes in randomly. There's such well-worn stories. To your point, it just flows so beautifully. And so we'll see how far we get today. We're going to try and cover it all, but in case we don't. Interestingly, to the specter of Cormac McCorncob Man, really that's the last fifth of the book. So the rest of the book, actually, there's a lot of stuff that probably was inspirations in terms of particularly the occupation of Mexico, like that big middle chunk.
Well, and yeah, the way that the kid is written at the beginning of Blood Meridian is that he's a violent wanderer. Which, to give it I'm stealing Gabe's line here, but to do a Spenglerian reading of what Chamberlain says.
Let's go.
Yeah,
Spengler.
To give that reading of what Chamberlain says he does, he's essentially like getting into brawls every single day on his way across the country, taking odd jobs to make ends meet, and then just picking up stakes whenever it suits him, and laying pipe on his way across
whipped.
America.
There is so much pipe laid and men stripped down and tied down and whipped. Like there is at least 100 instances of both in this book.
Yeah. This dude had his manifest destiny in the skirts of every woman he met. So,
with tasteful illustrations to boot.
They're generally tasteful illustrations. They're very nice.
But when you do eventually get to the last 50 or so pages, every single paragraph is turned almost directly into a chapter in Blood Meridian. It's hilarious.
But like you can pull out a random quote in this entire, like just random page, and you can find a line that's just a straight up banger, and he's such a good storyteller. Like I could imagine him, because he I don't know if the Alaric's version has the Butterfield introductory note
No, it doesn't.
to it.
It does not.
You can correct
No,
me.
it doesn't.
It doesn't?
It does not.
That's really...
It says it needs no introduction.
Well, fair, but I actually kind of appreciate some of the stuff Butterfield puts in the introduction in the older publication, because it sort of talks about Chamberlain's actual life, So, I mean, he died in 1908. His wife held on to it as a family heirloom. He never published it, but it was kept, and he was quite proud of it. He would tell people about it. So I can imagine this older man who is now settled down and had a family and with his wife and kids, telling stories in the exact same way, maybe a little sanitized, but in the same way that this book is written, because you can read this book out loud and you can make this an audio drama.
Yes.
Like there is no need to edit this at all. This could be a perfect radio
TOOKY'S,
play or stage production.
Let's do it.
I mean, the prose is so good. I mean, I don't want to be flashy here, but I mean, like, you can just pull out a full... here, page 213. And she was not yet 14, but this was in Mexico, where mothers at 12 were not uncommon. This child woman was as voluptuous and as graceful in shape as Venus de Michi, full of rich blood and pure heart, and had never yet throbbed with the ecstatic bliss of love. I led her to the lower springs near our camp, hid her in a dense grove, and quieting her fears with the promise to hasten back, I tore myself away from her embrace and went into camp. And of course, this is from a 16-year-old boy's perspective. I'm not here to comment on any age differences discourse here. I'll let Gabe do that. But like, again, this is like a 15, 16-year-old boy with like a church education, and this is the way that he's writing that. I imagine this is some guy sitting around a campfire, much older in life, telling this kind of story of his adventures in the Mexican-American War. And he has these tasteful cuts to black, like the Hays Code was already implemented when he was writing this. Like, he just says, yeah, I slept with her, but here's this poem to tell you what I did.
And it's also... I have another one, too. This is page 159 in the Dissident reprint. Our march back to Agua Nueva was that of a mob. In fact, I believe the entire command was drunk. Officers, men, women, horses, and mules. Officers rode through the ranks and were run down by crowds of drunken troopers. The gun carriages were loaded down with artillerymen lashed on. How long we were in reaching Agua Nueva, I have not the faintest idea. I retained a foggy recollection of marching in a half-asleep condition for weeks, as it seemed to me. We must have pushed on all night, for we reached Agua Nueva the next day, all used up, our horses well fagged out. And, like, describing this, like, horrible slog in this, like, this wild pandemonium of just everything is completely declined and unhinged. Is, like, you can... in that, and I mean, that's not even close to the Blood Meridian section, but you can see there, like, that's something that you can imagine Cormac McCarthy having read and been like, I'll have that. I'll have that. I'll have that.
Absolutely.
That wonderful scene during, obviously, the best battle scene is the Buena Vista one. When the rain starts for about 15, he said it lasts for 15 minutes. It's cold. It feels like ice
downpour.
sitting there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, dude, that battle was hell. He describes it as basically hell. It's just pure chaos. It's smoke. The Mexican army feels like it's like Warhammer. Like, they have priests in their army, and they do like a weird Catholic like battle cry beforehand. They do like a little like a micro parade. It is absolutely chaotic. And the ravines, they try to trap them, and you got Jefferson Davis makes a cameo. He saves the day, and Chamberlain's like, yes, the good Jefferson Davis, honorable to a great man. Of course, this is a prequel to the Civil War. So stuff like that. And also the real history stuff. Because Chamberlain, he's writing this, let's see, hold on.
He wrote this, he was a Union officer.
He was a brigadier
ended
general.
He ended up getting an honorary brigadier general rank.
Yep, he sadly was a hicklib. He was a hicklib,
but he's also like, writing admirably of like Albert Pike, who ended up being a Civil War general, on the Confederate side, and Jefferson Davis. He was an honest, I guess, not colored by the loyalties of the later conflict.
It was such an interesting historical introspection into interstate relations and sort of culture, the way he views people from different cultures, and interracial as well. Like it's not like, I'm thinking of particularly a scene with the judge later when he shows Mercy, and I was like, oh my God, are you insane? And he's like, well, he's a fellow white man. I can't leave him. Can't leave him like this. And there's like some instances where
he's not an Indian or a greaser.
Yeah, exactly. But then he would be so helpful and kind to people. It was just such an interesting view, and the way he would describe the people from not Oklahoma, Arkansas. The Arkansas people, and like almost as subhuman, but he almost had some Southern sympathies in places too, like with some of the interaction with the girl early on, and I just found it fascinating as the way he viewed it. It was not the way that we today view each other across states.
Yeah, the Arkansas people are portrayed as brutes. I think they're called like rackensackers. Yeah. Like that's their nickname.
Yeah. Because they're like horrific looters and rapists, and
they're Cossacks. Basically,
probably Blood Meridian.
It's hilarious. They're basically they let their, he says, he lets their sabers rust. They sell their horses. All they care is like brutality. And then you realize, oh wait, he's talking about people from Arkansas.
Yeah.
Well, that is where Bill Clinton is from. So I guess he had something to some sort of gut instinct. No, but I mean,
you ever seen Bill Clinton's horse?
Never seen Bill Clinton's horse? It ran for president once.
Nice.
I think that's sort of maybe an important digression before we maybe get into the text proper, is that presentism is everywhere, and it's sort of this is a refreshing reminder that the country was not what it is today, and it was arguably for the better, but also that this is just a great refresher that you don't have to view things through the lens of liberal white women academics telling you that everything was gay, racist, and awful, and that in fact, if you were a 16-year-old and you were adventurous, you too could have a good time in the Mexican-American War. But on a serious note, I think it's sort of important to realize that with texts like these, that you don't have to view things through 21st century morals, and that you should always try and put a good disconnect between your worldview of today and what actually took place 150, 160 years ago. Because we don't have, we have no relation to these people at all. Like, the America of today is nothing like the America of the frontier when it was still alive and around. And that's when the late Frederick Jackson Turner was writing, like, what a disaster and what a tragedy it would be that the frontier is closed, because that's what made Americans was the frontier. And the Mexican-American War and all these fights in the West and being a coachman, or the gold rush, that's what made us who we were and who we are to some extent still today. And this text is really a great reminder of what this country was and maybe what it one day can be again.
Agreed. In America here is a civilization. Like Chamberlain's talking from a standpoint of a genuine ethnos. He's a Yankee. He's a self-described Yankee. And, he describes people from Arkansas and Virginians. Like, each state is basically their own ethnic group in a genuine sense. As a Balkan mutt, it definitely does feel that way. Each people have a distinct sense of their own cultural and, local roots.
Yeah.
And it goes even to the military, even in Mexico, even as they're fighting as quote unquote one, they are still distinct in their own identities. I mean, bio-Leninism, the Irish people literally a bunch of Irishmen defect to their fellow Catholics during the Buena Vista to fight them at one point.
The San Patricias. Yeah, and he refers to people, there are like ethnic Germans and ethnic Scottish people wandering around, getting involved in this conflict for various for various reasons, whether for lack of something better to do or because they settled in an area that got overrun by Mexicans or Apaches or whatever.
Yeah. Wait a minute, Cap, are you saying the mixing pot of southern Texas, northern Mexico didn't turn out very well? Is that, how did that...
Are you saying multiculturalism failed?
I don't know that it necessarily failed in the sense that we no longer have ethnic Germans and ethnic Scots running around as distinct groups.
Yeah,
depending on...
That was an interesting point. In the Battle of Buena Vista, right? Because they had General Santa Anna's letter presented to General Zachary Taylor, who would later become president of the United States. But and they had a German surgeon present the letter and have it, explained to him. And then General Taylor's like, "Tell this damned Dutchman to go away and write it in Spanish." And you're just like, one, Dutchman, German, Deutsch, I get it, right? Like there's a running gag that you would call yourself Black Dutch. To say that you weren't German, especially around the times of World War I and such, because no such thing actually exists. But again, we don't talk about people that way. We don't say those damn dirty Dutch.
Well, speak for yourself, Prude.
Speak for yourself. Well, I'm not Dutch. I don't have that problem of touristy weed and bicycles everywhere. But yeah, the Dutch are good people. Some of them are assholes, but most of them, some I assume, are good people.
All right, before we jump in, actually, one last thing just occurred to me. We got a triple Lone Star representation. I'm a native Texan myself, actually. I have believe it or not.
Really?
And Gabe, I don't know if I can cut this if you want me to include it, but I know you're Texan fella.
Yeah, that's fine.
And Prude's a proud Texan, so
Triple
we're standing with you. Respect to Chamberlain. Maybe we're related. Who knows?
And of course, we got the token Yankee. We got Cap. We got the token.
Sorry,
Yankee.
fellas, Midwest, Midbest.
That's mid.
You have less than 1 year.
Everyone deserves a quirky mid.
Quirky Cap.
Well, Samuel Chamberlain had a lot of quirky
he
mids.
single-handedly lightened the skin tone of northern Mexico.
I love how you had to pause there. You were like, he raved well.
Yeah.
What word were you going to use?
He's a gentleman. All right, he's a sensitive young man.
He put Blanca Quiento to work.
This dude, he love the senoritas. No one has
that should be the title for the show. The sidebar reviews. My confession: this man fucks.
Yeah, just have an ab romance novel cover.
What we really should have done is tried to calculate his body count in this one. Both body counts.
Oh, I should have taken notes.
This guy takes out some dudes and takes out some women.
I have some notes actually.
This kills bites off a nose.
Kills and drills.
Kills and drills. That's it.
Oh no, that should be the thumbnail. Get laid with Mexican women with this one simple trick. It's his cover.
Brought to you by
Seminex. By the way, guys, it's time for a word from our sponsor, Seminex. Are you having trouble drilling your way across the United States and northern Mexico and the Texas Republic? Well, try Seminex. It will keep you rough and ready every day.
Perfect.
We'll have several more of these ad reads.
I think we're good to go then, Gabe. If you want to be our guide into the world of Samuel Chamberlain, let's dive in and start doing part one.
Absolutely. Now, Samuel Chamberlain, he started writing this manuscript actually relatively soon after his escapades in Mexico. He started initial writings between 1855 and only stopped writing in 1861 during the infamous Civil War. So, at the beginning of it starts with on a cold and dreary day in December 1844, when he bid farewell to his friends at the Worcester Depot out of the city of Boston. He's a Bostonite. Worst day. And it opens with literally the Reverend calling him worse than the devil. Now, Chamberlain, in a lot of ways, is most likely the ancestor of the good Grunauer. Yeah, he is absolutely a sensitive young man. He was educated. We don't know much about his parents, but he was educated in a church school. Was mostly what he calls what was called then a muscular Christian. You know, he's an athlete. He's of course very, very modest about his athletic skills, obviously. And the surrounding women of the school just happen to swoon around him. He catches many eyes of beautiful blondes and brunettes. The reverend's son gets jealous. He's put in a self-defense situation. And, of course, he defends himself. And a beautiful, big-titty brunette falls in love with him. And he offers her hand in marriage. And the reverend ends up agreeing that she should get married. So, our beautiful 16-year-old Samuel Chamberlain, he thinks it hasn't made. He's like his hero Don Quixote and Sir Walter Scott. He has his own Dulcinea. He is a romantic, chivalry knight of chivalry. And he decides that, his life, he's made it. He's made it. But of course, her parents call him a retard, basically, and a loser. And he loses. There's this great quote. Hold on, let me find it, This is the physical copy.
We might have the same quote circled, by the way, because I wrote Grunhauer right next to this.
You did too, you son of a bitch, of course.
Let me see what line you pulled. I want to hear. And if you don't, I'll read this one as well.
I like how we went from Samuel Chamberlain as an early ancestor of Spencer Grunhauer, and what a case to make for, the genetic deterioration of the country.
Actually, my confession is also inspired Nutcranker. If you know this.
It's
true.
It's only real Straussians know. Oh, where is it? Hold on. Oh, fuck.
Is it bottom of page 3?
Oh,
that's the one I'm looking at.
While he goes looking for the quote, I found it interesting that he's just like, yeah, I was going to be raised to be clergyman, and then I started, learning how to fight people, and I realized that this was a far better indulgence / passion. I became a very muscular Christian as soon as I learned I could beat the crap out of people. And I didn't, it's sort of a shame that the Larrick's Dissident Review doesn't have this from the Butterfield introduction, because he makes a note from one of the people who has this affidavit when they sign him up for enlistment to go down to Mexico. I certify that this man is of sober mind, and he's like, all right, Samuel Chamberlain is 6'3", pale complexion, silver eyes, and brown hair. Dude is jacked. At the age of 15.
This dude had no microplastics.
What 0 seed oils does to a motherfucker.
Yeah.
I found a line, by the way. It's but at the end of page 4. Thus, I lost confidence in women's love and faith for religion, and went forth shunned as if I was another Cain.
Nice. Let me read mine. It was right before that. He gets challenged to a battle with this vestryman who's the singing choir leader. And so he tells him to screw off. He tells Chamberlain to screw off because Chamberlain stands up for a girl he was, bullying unjustly. Inclined to do so, he proceeded to put me out. Shades of Belcher K forbid! Harry of the Wind! Ivanhoe! Don Quixote inspire me to meet the shameless oppressor of girls' rights! He clinched me, and then all of the long pent-up knight-errantry and the 7 champions of Christendom consolidated in me, burst, and pain, the teacher, lay prostrate, bleeding, almost annihilated. The tears of my loved one were revenged in blood. That is Grunhauer to a T, bro. Tell me this is not
This is his blood
inspired.
memories. This is his implicit bubbler's man. Well, this section is perfect. I'm glad we basically crib in the same section. Because he does this. Good. He wants to get her he even calls her my own queen of hearts. And then he goes full Chudjack. This is how brain rot I was. I was cracking up when he's like, I lost confidence in women's love, faith for religion. It's so over. I'm just like Cain. It's full West has fallen. It's over. I can literally see the Chudjack meme. There's so many memeable sections in this book. It is golden.
He literally made memes of them with his drawings, where he's always 10 feet tall and the guy standing like a warrior, and some brown guy is curled up at his feet crying.
You see, Jorge, I depicted myself as Jack.
And you as the virgin greaser.
That needs to come back into parlance.
I mean,
yeah.
I like. Okay, so quick note. Just so he never utters the phrase like Mexican man. He says greaser every time, but it's only for men. With women, he's like senoritas or poblanas if they're like plainer village women, or dona if it's like a lady, right? But he's saying he's very much more respectful of the women than he is the men, and it's like, it's and if he's like becomes, there are a couple like Mexicans that he does end up becoming friendly with. He just refers to them by name, right?
Yeah.
But every single Mexican man is a greaser. Every single
it's
one.
Very Indo-European of him.
Yes.
Very new Indo-European expansion. We'll take the women, the men not so much.
Yes.
Based miscegenation.
Well, yeah. If you take the woman, she's part of your tribe now. That's
Yeah,
four
that's
brides.
the rules.
Go for it.
Well, I remember one section near the end. No, near the middle where he saves. There's this little villa that gets some of the women get cuddled, almost attempted cuddled by some volunteers. And one of the old patrons there, he calls the old Mexican, and he treats him nicely. I remember the term old Mexican at least used once, at least.
Yeah. I don't get too out of order, though, because I think we made it through the first 3 pages in 30 minutes, so I'm pretty proud of us. We're making, we're breezing through, as is our standard way.
No, this is a part 1 for sure. I can feel it.
Dude, every time I tell these guys, like, this is going to take longer, and every time they're always like, nah, don't be a pussy. We'll be fine. We'll power through it. It's just too much Kino. Like, I'm going to do more quotes as we go. And Gabe, I don't know if you want to do, but like, the rest of the first chapter or so is essentially he departs and he's going via Baltimore and Harper's Ferry to his uncle. I forget his uncle's name.
Yeah.
Oh,
in
yes.
Illinois.
Augustus, I think, was his uncle's name?
You guys, or is that his nephew's or his cousin Augustus? I can't remember, but.
Well, we got to talk about the train scene, obviously.
Oh my God, yes. Do you want to go ahead? Go ahead. This is your section.
The uncle's name is Adam
Chamberlain.
Adam, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Prude.
And Augustus the son. That's definitely it. Oh, Gus.
The cousin he cucks. Yeah, there's a lot of cucking. Mr. Chamberlain, he's the king of the cucks, basically. So he basically he goes to search for his uncle for a little money, for a little work, for a loan, I believe. So he travels via ferry. Of course, he tries to skim out on paying half the time. He falls off the boat. He gets covered in mud. He gets in about, I think, a half a dozen fistfights before he finally meets his uncle. And finally he comes on a train ride. And then he gets with his first love outside of Boston, who is unnamed. So he's sleeping on the train. Very nice train ride with food. He sleeps, he wakes up. And if horror, he wakes up next to what we would call an onion eater. Right? A beautiful, colored onion eater. Who is 250 pounds, by the way. He's a big bubba for a place without seed oils or microplastics. So, for the sake of his own eyes and for his own aesthetic values, he not wanting to be the 18th century equivalent of Daniel Perry, he looks away and he finds a handsome, beautiful little girl head on his shoulder, sleeping. And, to make sure she's balanced so she doesn't fall off, he puts his hand underneath her torso, and they decide to sleep together, quote unquote. He makes a great boomer dad joke about it. He's like, we get to, when you sleep with someone, you get to know them real well. It was clearly a flash forward of a dad joke. So she wakes up, she has beautiful black eyes, and she wakes up and she's actually I believe she's actually basically a
daughter of a senator. Of a late senator. He passed away.
A late senator, and she's a landowner.
Senator Fulton of Arkansas.
Yes, and there's a lot of interesting ethnic, other than the obvious ethnic with the onion eater part, but because the onion eater is actually the property of a young and boastful Virginian, who now Samuel and the girl doesn't want the onion eater in their carriage. He should be riding on the back of the train. But the young Virginian, he's very boastful. He's like, listen, damn it, I paid $12,000 for this guy. I'm not going
$1,200.
This melanated gentleman. Yeah.
I'm not going to risk his health because you got your store. He says something like, you got your clothes at the store.
He got it. That boy was worth $1,200, and doggone his buttons if he would allow him to catch his death of cold for all the cursed Yankees that ever wore store clothes.
Which is an odd diss.
It's a fucking great diss. It means he got his shit off the rack and it wasn't bespoke.
Yeah. Southerners get their clothes handmade, I guess. That is a good
The
flex.
gentleman would.
But here's the thing. He is a petite bourgeois Southerner, while the girl, she's actually an aristocratic Southerner. She has a whole ass plantation, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And she's like, listen, she has a base Karen moment. Listen, if he dies, I will pay for it. Y'all sit in the back of the bus. So the young Virginian, with his base black friend, they pull a Rosa Parks to go in the back of the train.
Slave, to be clear. Base black slave.
Well, yeah, you can still be friends.
True.
Right, so...
Chamberlain is very quick to be like, and his chattel. Let's...
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Let's just be... Yeah, let's...
Well, I know guys who, pet their cows and such, Anyway.
I think it's different when I pet my cow versus I'm going to pet the woolly hair of a person I own. But sure,
man, back in those days, you could do that. We all want to do it. Yeah. We all just want to pet black hair all the time.
Typical white man. You want to touch their hair. The generational trauma.
No
generational trauma. I refuse. So this woman has fallen in love with him. Obviously, clearly. As soon as she has woken up upon his shoulders, she has met the love of her life. So they get drunk together. He takes her to her room as a gentleman Chamberlain, of course. He values the sanctity of her hymen and her maidenhood. But she wants to desperately get married immediately. And she basically says, we're going to be going back to... Where is she from? I forgot where she's from. We're going back in 2 weeks, and I demand you come. I demand it. And there's a beautiful breakup scene, which really, it's like, as a Zoomer, it's very true to reality. He's like, listen, I can't go. I need to see my uncle. And she has a full tantrum. She's like, I hate you. I never loved you. She has I will kill you. I'll have your entire family.
Are you talking about in the letter?
No, in real life. She has this tantrum in real life with him.
Oh, when they part.
Yes. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's
hilarious.
Straight up woman moment right there. It's fantastic. There's so many other scenes just like this throughout the book. Like, if you think this is excessive, there's going to be 50 more encounters that are just like this.
They did fuck Gabe, just to be totally clear, because he said we had considered ourselves man and wife.
Oh yeah, but that's in spirit.
They knew each other biblically, but he was like, listen, I gotta go, and I get that you're an heiress, but this ain't just gonna work out.
Oh no, he tries to double dip. After the uncle, but sadly, she already gets hitched with some other guy at that point. But
total woman moment.
Oh yeah, because there's an exchange of letters, and he's just like, well, I do miss her and all that. And then in the matter of weeks, she's like, well, I want to hold on to you. And she's like, well, I've married another man. I've never loved you.
Also, I told him we fucked.
She just blows him up. It's like he plugs his phone into recharge, and there's 200 texts that are the full stages of acceptance. Or the stages of grief.
And I don't even think he replies. I think it's just the mental K that you would send if you really wanted to piss her off. But he's like, I've never been more distraught, just to see this woman go from a matter of weeks professing love to me and then married another man and wants me to die in a fire.
Yeah, and by the way, if you come back here,
I'll have you killed.
It's a fight on site. Yeah.
I just love that's how she ended the letter. She was like, by the way, my new husband wants to kill you because I told him we fucked, so just be aware. Sorry about that. You have a millionaire trying to kill you.
It's like the Perry Bible Fellowship comic where it's the two jars of like peanut butter and jelly are about to wed, and then as soon as he opens up her top, he hears the pop, and all of a sudden you realize that she's been used before, and he's like, "Scandalous wench shall kill that knife on sight." And yeah, it's Samuel Chamberlain right there.
Samuel Chamberlain is like standing outside of the window, and he's a butter knife.
He would use a fucking butter knife.
Well, he's got a bayonet, not a butter knife. He's a bayonet.
Yeah, he would use a butter knife though. I would easily see Chamberlain fuck someone up with a butter knife.
Yeah, he just is a butter knife, holding a bayonet, killing greasers.
Stabbing tamales.
Nice.
See this scene.
We need artwork of this.
This art, this and the slideshow, Dave's slideshow with all the videos. This is gonna be Kino right here. It's gonna be just nothing but Kino.
This and product placement for Seminex. It'll be great.
Need to commission some art though. Somebody out there, please.
I'm DMing it right now. Maybe we'll have it before this
Let's
goes
go.
live.
Prudent for the clutch. But that scene, the breakup scene, well, is so realistic. I honestly thought he was like, he either made it up or the girl was never real. I should have looked up the name, because sometimes he will actually will
So
reference
many
the name.
people in this book have Wikipedia articles.
Yes,
and all of them are interesting. Like,
yeah,
it's amazing.
Like, you could probably read. It's a very breezy read. You can read the book in maybe 2 days. But if you want to go full on tangents with the side characters and like Wikipedia hunting, you could easily just spend a month, and it's so fucking fun. Like, Pike alone was hilarious.
Albert Pike, is I have read Morals and Dogma, his tome of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and that is an incredibly interesting piece of esoterica.
Oh,
FYI.
Well, you didn't read his book, Aryan Gods, in the Hindu manuscripts?
I didn't, but he was actually one of the leading pre-theosophical American authorities on Vedic texts.
Really?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was a super interesting guy. Definitely deserving of
next episode.
I'm not sure that anything he wrote we could cover, but
we're rebranding, guys.
We're rebranding. We're just
doing
deep dives into
historical
Albert Pike
accounts.
Well, see, Yankees, the Southerners were the real multiculturalists. We love our Indians.
All right, we're on to page 13 now. We're getting there. Page 13 of a 368 page book or so. Gabe, do you want to keep us cruising? You want me to take over a bit?
Yes. Sorry. We got too caught up.
Oh no, I'm loving it. I'm just trying to keep us a little bit on track.
Yes. So after gently breaking the heart of his crazy ex-Southern girlfriend, and also there's a little cute stereotypes about Yankees apparently wooden clocks, like
wooden
he says,
clocks and nutmeg.
Yeah, apparently that's a Yankee thing, apparently. I don't know what... Oh, I guess because the Dutch used to be clockmakers or so forth. But anyway, so fast forward. So he finally comes to his uncle, and who is 45, well of a young for an uncle, and he's an absolute dick. And for the most part, he says, listen, I ain't got no money. You ain't gonna get shit. You can work here for a couple months. You'll work your way here. You can attend a local university. So he says sure. So he spends a couple months at his uncle's place with his cuck cousin Augustus. Working the horses. He likes riding the horses. And if I recall correctly, he spends... I don't know how long he spends with his uncle in the full timeline. He plays very fast and loose at the time, but it's longer than 6 months, I want to say. And he gets along with them, and eventually... He eventually breaks off with his uncle due to the fact his cousin Augustus invites some ladies to the farm and, wants to show off that, he's the leader of the ranch. And, of course, the ladies, just Chamberlain he's so modest. He always makes sure to tell you he's a very modest man, but the modesty is like a magnet. It attracts the women. Of course, Augustus has incel rage. He tries to fight. Yet again, Chamberlain is put in a self-defense situation yet again, of course, and puts Augustus on his ass. And then his uncle tries to kill him with a fucking axe. And Chamberlain nearly kills his own uncle with said axe. But of course,
except his squad of convent girls who deeply desire his D stop him from murdering his family.
Yeah, for the sheer power of horniness is the only thing to prevent his bloodlust. So he drops his axe. And cries on a log for a little bit, and then finally gets out of Dodge, and ends up being a wagonman in New Orleans and picks up drinking for the first time. And of course, falls
bangs a French girl,
banging multiple French girls.
Time. You skipped the entire riverboat trip.
Oh,
I mean, we're gonna miss some keynote. There's also the slave. That was interesting. The escaped slave. So Chamberlain finds the escaped slave in a barn, and brings him in. Tells his uncle. His uncle's like, "Oh, we'll help him out." And then he puts him in the back of a thing and just turns him in for the bounty.
$500. I think
that's like $500. Yeah, that's pretty good. Back in those days, what would that be like? Probably be like worth like $3,000 or something. Like, that would be worth a lot more. Anyway, but Chamberlain just doesn't. I think he describes him as like the worst kind of Yankee, because he's like this penny pinching, soulless northern man who's living out west.
Yeah, that's when the hick lip part of Chamberlain comes up. Sadly,
$500 in 1845 is $20,000.
Not bad.
Holy shit, dude! I would. Yeah, I'm sorry, brother. I would turn you into our black listeners.
Our thriving black listener community on a sidebar.
All two of them.
Yeah.
Both of them Irish.
Those are my sables, sir.
Black guys,
which is a term we got to bring back.
Sidebar. They are so unfathomably fucking based that there's no way any of us could actually compete. No way. It is.
Yeah.
It's Clarence Thomas level.
Well, Cap or Prue, do you guys want to do the riverboat and maybe a little bit? Gabe's been talking for a while. I don't want to put it all on him. These sections are pretty long, and we're probably going to end up splitting this anyway. So,
I figured that we would. Yeah, I mean, also the illustrations, a slight unpleasantness settled about the axe. His illustrations are so great. That's what makes this so wonderful. But so yeah, after the fight, right, we are finding ourselves trying to escape, right, from all of the violence and the people that were about who he's dealing with here. So he's on one of the great brag boats of the Mississippi and was bound for St. Louis. We came in sight of my pursuers, who waved a handkerchief and hailed us. Fortunately, a huge steamer came puffing around the bend, making for us. The captain recognized her as a new boat, the St. Anthony, built expressly to beat the White Cloud. Instead of stopping, our fires were increased, black smoke rolled out of the chimneys, and we dashed through the water at great speed. Our opponent replied with her steam whistle and notes of defiance and vast volumes of dense smoke, and it became a race as we flew by Baton Rouge with the St. Anthony half a mile astern. My mind was no longer on the race, but on her whom I was so cowardly deserting. Now I could see the huge cypress tree near the hut where we had enjoyed so many happy hours. Oh, how I wished that Stella LeBoyce was the companion on my flight. How I regretted that I had not eloped with her before the denouncement took place. But such thoughts were idle, and I felt we were separated forever. And then he's off to St. Louis in like 5 days. And then you get the Alton Guards mutiny stuff where we'll eventually make our way towards the Mexican-American War. But I mean, yeah, like the first 30 pages are more or less just like, look, my uncle's a piece of shit who wants me to die by taking on wild horses and trying to like break them in. And I'm still a braggart and a womanizer to my own extent. And I'm 6'3" and I can beat the shit out of anybody. And it's just like, this is this is like, if there was ever someone that you wanted a literally me character for, it would be this guy. I'd much rather be Samuel Chamberlain than any sort of Ryan Gosling character. Sorry, but this is
Heresy. Heresy.
quite well. I actually have some issues with like the whole literally me style deal, because it seems to be that the only outlet for like sensitive young men, or really just white men in general, to identify with are characters of like sociopathic killers. I find like why you shouldn't be identifying with Bateman to some extent. I don't think you should be identifying with like The Killer, the recent Netflix film that came out. Like I get it, it's humorous, it's intended, but I feel like maybe there are better, more like masculine characters to identify with. I feel like Chamberlain is definitely one of them. But
He's far more noble.
well, sure, but also just like I feel like he is a better character to identify with or want to aspire to be, is just like this handsome, roguish character, rather than sort of like a sociopathic, I have to play within the confines of polite society, because I mean that's sort of how a lot of lefties view like white men, as just like these sociopathic murderers that are ready to like turn into Patrick Bateman and put on like the plastic raincoat and kill someone with an axe. Like I don't want to be that guy, and I don't want to give people the impression that I'm that guy. I'd rather be swole dick Samuel Chamberlain, like just killing Mexicans and doing what I want to do, right? Like that's a far better thing to identify with. But we're now seeing the an upper Alton, and we're beginning to see, of course, the sort of the mutinies that come up here. But we're now going to see a lot of the introductions to our character, or a lot of these famous characters in the Mexican-American War, but also just American history in general that no one knows about today. So, I mean, for instance, General Wool addressing the mutineers. For me, this is page 33, and this is the footnote that reads here. Brigadier, later Major General John Ellis Wool, commanded the Army of the Center in Mexico under General Taylor's general command. He was the commanding general at Fortress Monroe, Virginia, during the early years of the Civil War. Brigadier General James Shields, brevetted Major General after the Battle of Cerro Gordo, where he was wounded, and later governor of the Oregon Territory. Like, thank God for these footnotes. But I mean, also, you're introduced to these huge pieces of American history. We also get to see a lot of these. We also get to see Chamberlain's, like, his own life dealing with coming into the men and being a part of the establishment there, and gambling and fighting his way through quite a bit there, to where he's almost killed also as well, because towards the river, he's not feeling so well. He was bewildered, senseless, barely conscious to be aware that he was being dragged down the bank towards the river. Where was my companion? Where's everything that was going so great at this bar? And all of a sudden I'm being robbed, and he grabs...
I was ready to just kill him
Yeah.
for his boots.
Kill him for his boots. Literally kill him for his boots and whatever pocket money he had on him.
The American Volunteer
and so
Corps
barely-
is almost like a prison gang. Like, it is just so rough.
Oh, yeah.
And he's probably,
bad.
I think, 17 at the start of the Mexican-American War.
He's
He's
still-
16.
Yeah.
16.
Yeah, like, we're not... We have to remind ourselves, everyone, this is a 16-year-old, and so we're by the levees, but also at the same time, drinking, gambling, military life is not what it is today. And back then, of course, you're going to see later on that there are no doctors available. So like hundreds, if not thousands of people died of all sorts of diseases, and camp life sucks. So just go out and fraternize if necessary or whatnot. But no, in this situation, right, like, again, so here's a great banger. So for me, this is page 36. I lay still, feeling weak and faint, yet collecting all the energy and life left in me for the struggle for existence. He emptied my pockets and stooped to lift me into the water, when, with a grip like death, I grasped with both hands his throat, while my teeth fastened on his nose so desperately that they met. He struggled to throw me off, but though I was in a dreamy, languid state, and my head had a heavy roaring noise like a cataract in it, my hold could not be shaken off. His efforts were terrible, but all in vain. My grasp was immovable, like the embrace of a corpse. Like, that's just... How many 16-year-olds can write like this today, for starters?
Well,
but also...
He
Yeah, go
didn't
ahead.
start writing until like 10 years later or something.
Yeah.
10 years later.
Sure,
But he still didn't have
but
an
I mean, to have
education.
one,
But he still didn't have an education.
still didn't have an education, right? Like, this was a relatively uneducated man who had a who was well read in his youth, but I mean that's the extent of your education outside of military life, and working with there is plus you have an actual Judge Holden that he'll encounter later towards the end, but it's it's still pretty impressive to have a good recollection. I'm sure this allows you to embellish things, but really good prose for someone that doesn't have a good level of education. It's like reading Civil War letters. These relatively nearly illiterate, uneducated men could still write better prose than most people can today. And that's not to do the whole like old good nostalgia great, but it does illustrate that this is a fantastic read, and you really will enjoy this because every page has a paragraph that's this
and
good.
These men were healthier men. Literally, this comes from a foundation. The average illiterate man, a 15-year-old man, was objectively a fitter, better, and lived. He lived it in a embodied experience of life. So even just their natural views on everyday life would be far more interesting and much more colorful, because they don't get without the necessities of a voluntary education. Every idea they have is their own idea. So the way they would express those ideas is fundamentally unique to their own way of seeing it. I mean, when he describes that scene, and the guy's terrified shitless, right? Because he basically thinks he's a zombie. He thinks he's undead. He's going to take him with him to the bank. And I do think he kind of killed him. I do think he kills him, because he says, "Oh, I struck him in the neck. I struck him in a thick neck muscle. Oh, but it was just a flesh wound."
Well, he says that man went to the hospital, that he didn't kill him.
Yeah, I think that one lived. Murders will come.
He lives.
I promise, but
plenty of blood gets spilled. Don't worry,
I'm dude, how do you stab someone in a thick part of the neck, and he just hold the damn thing for an entire walk there?
I mean, maybe this dude's just got it a Dave Bautista neck.
I mean, yeah, like you were
Basically
saying, no
just
seed
shoulders
oils,
with a
working
head.
out.
Oh, like that black guy, the mugshot where he's just nothing but
It's
neck.
a hog neck.
Looks like Mount Fuji. Just the smooth gradient from the edges of the shoulders to the top of the head.
But I mean, this is just one little scene, and then they're on their way to Texas. And of course, he's still not doing so great. He's still injured. He's I feel like garbage. And here we are for Port Lavaca and Matagorda Bay in Texas. And then off to camp and away from Lavaca. And they're out and about to just deal with... And again, this is where you have the problems of no doctors and just how shitty it was back then. The ground was covered with water. It seemed to rain all the time, and the mumps, the measles, and the scarlet fever broke out among the troops. There was a great scarcity of doctors, hospital tents, and medical attendants, and many of the men died there. And it's sort of, before we have our antiseptics and drugs and everything like that, most deaths were deaths like these, and were not, combat.
Are you telling me that you can't get rid of infections by sunning your perineum?
Oh, I mean, it would help, but I don't think they knew this esoteric knowledge.
If only they had Semtex.
If only Samuel Chamberlain sunned his penis balls. Imagine what more he
It was just by happenstance because he was too busy having sex to go indoors.
Actually, also, we get a cameo from Glanton, John Glanton, who will become very important later. He, during this march, or it might be like camp or something, this march across the Rio Grande, they're in Texas, and basically Chamberlain says he just witnesses a bar fight where a ranger, what was it, they were gambling, they were playing poker, and a dispute arose. A short ruffian threw a glass of liquor at the tall one's face, who sprang to his feet, drew his revolver, placing the muzzle against the breast of the thrower, swore a fearful oath that he did not apologize. He would blow a hole through him a rabbit could jump through. And then, yeah, basically, John Glanton knifes the dude.
So the physiognomy, there's a physiognomy check in this scene where the guy who gets killed by Glanton is like a tall, blonde, blue-eyed guy, impeccably dressed, looks like Dudley Do-Right. And John Glanton is this like filthy, like haggard guy in these incredibly stained buckskins, and looks like a Mexican, but is a white guy. He's just like described in these like extremely vivid ways as this deranged character who just outdraws this other man and kills him, right?
Yeah, dishonorably too. Like, even says Chamberlain says he kind of like respects the guy. He finds him disgusting in a way, but he also is enamored with him in a way he can't quite describe. I guess by the guy's like brutality or vitality. And that will come back later. I had something else on this scene, this whole chapter scene of the scene with the volunteers and just how rough it was in this particular murder. This actually really put to mind Blood Meridian's opening to me, and just that nasty feeling of the town and all that. It's been like 10 years since I've read Blood Meridian, but I wouldn't be surprised if this and some of the other later parts, as we said earlier, kind of seeded with ideas that would come up later in that.
But there are a lot of the aspects of the Blood Meridian parts, like the book, they could easily cut them out. There's so much. There's so much. Like when you see Glanton, it's like oh shit, like, oh yeah, this is like you read this book expecting Blood Meridian because you have that in the back of your head, and no, this is Chamberlain. Like you get carried away on Chamberlain's prose, his life, his humor. Yeah. And then you see Glanton appear, like, oh shit, right? This is supposed to be the Blood Meridian book, right? It's so bizarre too.
And then, you get a brief foreshadow, and then you read another 200 pages or something before you get back to it. Actually, it's probably 300 pages before you get back to it.
and then you get the Blood Meridian DLC at the end, basically.
We're 10% of the way through this book.
You got to go through the Mexican-American War, main
campaign,
main storyline first before, the Blood Meridian expansion comes out. Sorry, you got to go through 280 some odd pages of the Mexican-American War and sleeping with every woman that apparently he runs into, because after the course the Glanton run and of course the fight and the runs of the Bowie knife there, he's thrown into prison. He's taken care of by Dr. Ritter. Fitted out with some German clothes, and then Catherine Ritter, who was not over 16, innocent and confiding, and I soon knew that she had given me unsolicited her first pure love. She seemed to consider she had an exclusive right to me, that I was in fact her property. I was afraid to hurt her feelings, yet honor forbid my returning her constant care.
And
we got to...
There's so many scenes like this.
We have to talk about Miss Ritter, actually, because she's in this section. So Chamberlain, I think he cheats at cards with his friend or something to that effect. Gets thrown in an old Spanish jail in San Antonio, and then it's like gets out with a fever and gets lost and wakes up at this German settler's house. In like a German.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't get. He fights that friend because they can't agree on a split of money. So they knife each other. He goes to jail, and the friend just forgets about it, basically. Refuses to press charges.
And he wakes up and spends a few days recovering at the Ritter household with Dr. Ritter and his sister, Prude. I think you were just referencing that tryst. And she tries to seduce him.
The doctor's sister. Sorry, I said daughter. My apologies.
It's all good here. This is the episode where we define.
It's all piped to him delay.
I mean, what's an ephebophile? Who knows what these words mean? He says,
well, when you're 16.
A premier libertarian podcast, apparently.
Yeah. Let me just read this one line. So she sneaks in her nightdress, kisses and thrilling embraces of an unsophisticated girl. I became almost delirious with hitherto unknown desires. But what trials to one's principles of honor, the temptation of St. Anthony, was not a circumstance of mine. So let me just skip ahead. I resisted and triumphed, and the honor of the House of Ritter suffered not at my hands. Poor Catherine at daylight left my room, weak and exhausted, and though still a virgin, yet no longer innocent in mind, and more in love than ever. I want to just interpret that as a minute. Are we talking about Chowtown? Is that what Chamberlain is describing? Yeah.
Okay. I mean, at least it's at least a finger bang.
Would Chamberlain? Do you think he would eat a girl out? I don't think so.
He gets pretty.
Seems like a gentleman.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's a matter of honor.
Yeah.
I don't.
I don't know if she's tired and exhausted. Left my room weak and exhausted, though still a virgin. Well, there's the throat part, to consider. But
a choke down.
Yeah. It's a job for a reason.
Look, they did some stuff, but it technically a virgin. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a German sausage hog down, huh?
Damn. that one stuck with me because it's just so. As you mentioned earlier, Prude, about the way he kind of cuts to black. As you kept, the cutting to black parts. I like the way he did it there. He tells you everything without, making it into a.
It's a polite wink and a nudge that. How does Dan Baltic describe it? Like tastefully horny.
Yeah.
Yes, traditionally horny.
Chamberlain is nothing.
This is the best example.
He is nothing but tastefully horny.
Okay, what comes next? They march across the Rio Grande. He does meet Ritter and the girl again, and he does bang her after she's married.
Yes, they consummate their marriage of the spirit. Yeah.
And then 150 years later, Stone Toss was born. That's how that happened.
But also, the important section though right after this is that he's in San Antonio and he is now out and away to learn how to use his rifle or his carbine and of course the saber. So he is loving his life as a dragoon, and he's enjoying how to be a cavalryman and to take on the role of a soldier in this respect. And of course they're using these old Mexican mission churches as sort of garrisons and places to be cleaned out, forage for his command, and so now they've got to clean out the nave of the church, and they got to clean out all the guano, so all the bad shit's got to go. And now they're out and about getting prepared as they keep moving from San Antonio. Now they're they see parts of the Alamo, so you're seeing areas that were just these very famous battles just years earlier with respect to the Texas Republic and independence. But now we're moving slowly closer and closer along. I do appreciate that he always, at least, I don't know if it was his original writing or if it was just the editors, but for the edition I have on my computer, every time that God or any other swear word is mentioned, it is always dashed out.
This one too.
Including
so you
damned.
have the
including
okay,
damned.
great.
Including damned.
Yeah,
including damned.
Which I love,
Yeah.
which I appreciate quite. Again, there's a gentleman aspect about it, which I greatly appreciate it. But they're moving around. They get their camps. They have their cheap brandy and the Fandango and all these. I love how greasers is always in quotation marks. It's always, he knows what we're talking about here.
Could you maybe spell out for us, for the people that haven't played Final Fantasy, a bit more about the Dragoon as a role historically? Because I found that interesting, the way this describes, because I've never read an account.
I've never played Final Fantasy, so would you like a Dragoon definition in terms of what it was in the military, or were you really hoping for a Final Fantasy
How do I
reference?
optimize my build? That's my question.
Okay. I did have a little section. I had done some additional research on the weapons that they're using because it's not super made clear by Chamberlain. So the standard weapons for the American Dragoons. So Dragoons in general are highly mobile mounted soldiers. So
they're cavalry.
Yeah, they're cavalrymen. So, but they're light cavalry, right? They're not like.
But they're like shock troops almost.
They're shock troops, exactly. They're meant to do flanking maneuvers and charges, etc., against less armored opponents. So the Americans have what Chamberlain is given is a cavalry saber, which is a mid-length sword. You could kill a horse or a man with it, but it's easier to fight from horseback with it than on the ground. And they also have Hall's carbines, which is a percussion cap rifle. So it still has to be individually loaded. It is not a repeater, but it uses percussion caps. So it's a between cartridge-based weapons and the old like full muzzle loaders. And then they also have,
as I recall, it's like you still put the ball in, right?
Yes,
but
exactly.
It's just a
You
single
still have to muzzle
unit
load
for
them,
all the powder,
but they fire much more reliably because of these percussion caps rather than like powder and flint. So and then they also have percussion cap revolvers. So they have 6 shots on the revolver, and but they also have to individually load those. They're not using cartridge based ammunition like modern would. And even by the time of there were repeating rifles 25 years later after this, but they didn't have,
I think even
yet.
the Colts, when he gets issued a Colt later and they say like, oh, this is not a beta, but it's like this is like an early
it's an early Colt
this.
Army. It's a percussion cap pistol. But the Mexicans have worse weapons, and they are fighting a generation back in terms of their weaponry, because they have escopetes, which is escopetes, I think is how it's pronounced, but it's essentially a short blunderbuss. It's like a small pistol. It almost looks like you imagine like a pirate's flintlock, and they are flintlock. So it's an older form of weaponry, and they have lances, actual spears that they use from horseback. So they're fighting with technology that is a generation back. So there's a significant technological advantage on the American side in this conflict.
Well, they still fuck people up.
Yeah, I mean, you still get
still
stabbed
very
in the chest
effective.
with a spear.
Yeah.
Like, it'll still kill you, but in terms of the technology, like they are fighting, much in the past.
Well, it's also in terms of diversity, also the diversity of people in there. It's a very ragtag. I mean, he has people like who served under Napoleon.
On the American side,
yeah, Napoleon, Polish Lancers, French cuirassiers, Hungarian Hussars,
Delaware Indians,
Irish. Yes, Indians, Irishmen who left England just based out of sheer contrarianism to be Americans. Like there's this one part where he's talking to an old Frenchman who's telling him stories about going to Egypt and Italy with Napoleon. And I'm like, there's no way. Because he calls him, I think he says he's like 60 or 70. I'm like, there's no way there's a 70-year-old Frenchman in bumfuck Mexico risking his life right now. There's no way. The very idea is just so interesting. Like these worlds apart just coming together like that. And here's this 16-year-old boy who's meeting these men and effortlessly just bonding with these men who has gone through several shades of shit more than he has, and Lord knows that Chamberlain has already gone through a lot. So again, it's the idea of the side characters. Like you get along with Chamberlain, you're like, wow, he achieved so much. He's like, this is an awesome story. And then the one random side character, you can literally go on like a 2-hour just digest of reading about them,
Yeah. The only other thing I want to add on to Cap, your description of the Dragoon and the tactics is that there's a lot of policing action that the Dragoons are assigned to. So like almost like the big chunk of the second half of the book, they're almost exclusively doing, well, there's some chasing down of guerrillas, or guerrillas as they're called there, and
guerrillas.
Yeah, trying to chase those dudes down. But a lot of it is just managing the volunteers and trying to keep them under control or at the front line of the battle, because as Dragoons, my understanding is, they're almost like they fight a little bit more infantry oftentimes, but they're mobile, so they can like move around and kick some ass and maintain order with this very disordered ragtag army. Well, the volunteers at least, very ragtag.
Oh, the volunteers are the worst. Yeah. They're the ones during the war crimes. they're motivated solely by whiskey. Chamberlain included.
Yeah, Chamberlain has a description for, like, there are 3 types of soldiers, basically. So you have the dirty recruits that are not to be trusted. They're the ones that are often getting in trouble. You can't give them money, booze, or anything. You have what are called old soldiers, so guys that stay in the camp, do their tasks. They might get promoted to corporal if they're striving, but good luck ever getting promoted to sergeant. And then there's the third type, the third and cooler option, which is me, the guy that goes out and does whatever he wants outside of camp, as long as I don't get in trouble, which he gets into trouble quite a bit. There are a few
like
court
multiple
martials throughout
a year.
His time in the military.
Court-martialed multiple times in this
Yes.
year and a half campaign. He's got a high average.
You know what this is? This is a fucking isekai. Like this honestly does read like an anime. He don't think about it. He's 16 years old. He's just out of high school.
Woke up in Mexico. Fantasy realm.
He has a harem. He basically has a harem anime of all different women of all variety of ages. Basically, he becomes a soldier. He does whatever he wants. He basically wins at every battle. Like, this literally this does read like a white version of a fucking isekai.
And a lot of these are nothing with. Well, there are some times where he pulls out his pistol, but I mean, most of these are sword fights. So I guess that lends some credibility. The white isekai. There's no need to even call it an isekai. This is just like just white excellence.
I was gonna say the white isekai is literally a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, like Mark Twain's novel.
Like the white isekai is just like this guy's whole story, which is based on his own experiences.
True.
A white isekai is just history.
This is the modern man's isekai.
Don't need to get transported to another
based...
world if the world you're in is conquerable.
Yeah. I don't need to be transferred to a weird historical fantasy land. I can conquer this weird historical fantasy land.
One other thing, in terms of the flow of this part, where they say there's a peace treaty, temporary peace treaty that Old Rough and Ready agreed to. Do you know any more context on that? Because it seems like Chamberlain thought that was like a huge blunder.
Yeah, he was really upset in the 8-week armistice. I think it's 8 weeks in the Mexican-American War, and I wasn't sure. I think it was for communication. I'm going to have to.
I think they just covered a bunch of ground too, so I could imagine maybe he's resupplying or yeah.
So it was. So all that it was for. It was after the Battle of Monterey, and it was essentially trying to ensure that, hey, I have no ability to communicate with my government on short notice. So they get to the outside of Monterey, which is one of Mexico's, it's its largest northernmost city, so they're here at Ampudia, which have got about 20,000 people, and it's a pretty defensible location. Taylor is more or less, of course, the smaller military force and is pretty much, not supposed to win this battle or not supposed to win this war, period, with what he's got. So as they're getting ready to renew their assault, doing so, they were, Ampudia, the general there, he's got he needs parley is what he's saying. So he's, and he sees this obviously as a really great time to get shit in order back home. So essentially, Ampudia asks for parley, the general there who's defending Monterey. General Taylor realizes that his own discipline is going to hell in a handbasket. We see this from Chamberlain's own stories, right? That clearly the volunteers are a mess, and someone like Chamberlain is obviously getting in trouble all of the time. And this allows them to have 8 weeks to get arms, ammunition, some discipline, and to basically say, you can go ahead and leave, and you can take your weapons and 1 6-gun battery with, I think, 21 shots per gun, which, of course, Chamberlain is pissed, because he's like, well, why don't we just take them? There's obviously no military discipline, and the lines of communication for the order of battle have fallen apart. So they have an 8-week armistice. Taylor's forces don't advance further than 50 miles to the south, and the agreement was stipulated that they could simply stop and make this armistice fall apart instantly if either government found it unsatisfactory. But I mean, both generals suffered severe damages to their reputation, which is why Chamberlain is really upset. But Ampudia is allowed to withdraw his army alive, but this allows Santa Anna to take the lead as the commander-in-chief of Mexican forces. But Taylor, is a war hero to most people, but he's viewed as he's reprimanded actually by the president himself, James K. Polk, who is one of the greatest American presidents of all time. Fun fact, I know this is a random history side note, but the first time that the Monroe Doctrine is ever debated, it is debated by James K. Polk, who wants to invoke the Monroe Doctrine to basically institute a military invasion of the Yucatan Peninsula to save white filibustering settlers in the area from being ethnically cleansed by the natives. So Polk is our most wild and adventurous and territorially expansive president in the history of the United States, arguably in comparison to, say, FDR, who has claimed through the post-war international order.
Man, I'm just saying we would have a much easier to guard southern border if the United States extended to Oaxaca. It would be way narrower.
Well, if I recall correctly, there was, I think, Calhoun, famously writes against that idea. Listen, and he writes it for very racial reasons. John C. Calhoun is listen, we cannot take most of Mexico because these people are not white and we shouldn't manage them. We already have a problem. It's
another
called
compromise
slavery.
we needed there. But hey, I'd have more wives. We just do the Chamberlain model. Just get as many as you can wrangle. I just sent a picture, and it's on page 59 of the Dissident Review version. What do you guys make of this? Because basically there's a missing chapter or two, or he just chose not to choose it. And there's a picture. I'll put it up in the video too when I post it. And it's an image here of Chamberlain lashed to his saddle, suffering from a severe head wound and a bad case of what he called mania apotu. What the fuck does that mean? Basically, he went off and he returned strapped to his saddle, possibly with poo-poo on his horse.
What page is
58
this?
and 59.
It's
58.
It's madness caused by it's being insanely drunk.
A drunkard.
Oh, so it's just so
he went on an unbelievable bender. Yeah.
Madness from the drink.
And
is what it means.
Wow.
Yeah, this
several
is a bender
points.
moment.
So everyone is drinking all the time. Obviously, I read that section earlier, but I mean, there are places where they're wandering through the desert and they're sustaining themselves on fucking whiskey and no water.
Giving the horses whiskey.
They're giving
a
the
shitload
horses
of whiskey.
But despite
despite
that, there are several points at which Chamberlain says, during this period, I was drinking to excess. It's but during all the other periods, having a pint of whiskey a day was fine. That's your ration. That's totally okay. But, you can drink to excess. So when you're drinking to excess, you are absolutely pounding that shit. If that's your normal.
So I mean, so in consideration, because we talk about alcoholism, or we talk about even prohibition. Here's how much America. So by 1830, this is from the National Archives. By 1830, that figure rose to 7.1 gallons in terms of annual drinking. Alcohol consumption. In 1790, we consumed 5.8 gallons of absolute alcohol annually for each drinking age individual.
So you're saying absolute, that's not the
2.3
bottle of whiskey, that's the bottle of whiskey distilled down to be 100% just the alcohol. And so that would be, I'm trying to do the mental math, but that would be a lot.
Yes.
Even whiskey. Even most whiskey that you would serve is
50% or something?
What?
It was like 40% or something.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it's
we're
like that.
talking
It's like
about
more than
like if
half.
this was just
Right.
a bottle of pure booze, like pure absolute alcohol,
God.
that's how much you drink per year annually. So I mean, the average American drank ridiculously more than anyone today. Like today's functioning alcoholics were today's average Americans 150 years ago.
They were pussies. They're pussies compared to that.
It's not. I don't have a problem, honey. I'm embracing my heritage. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem, sweetheart. I'm just doing what my grandfather would have
Chamberlain
done.
would be proud.
Now come here and let me beat you, you know? Like,
What would Chamberlain do? That is the way of the modern young Western man. What would Chamberlain do? That should be our motto.
embrace a muscular form of Christianity and stab greasers.
As many Latinas as possible.
Samuel Chamberlain, the poster boy of the bleach right.
The consistent siren song of the buxom Latina. Like
Before there were Khazar milkers, there
Before-
was
yes.
Latinas.
Yeah.
Before.
Misty's milkers for me, please.
Latina leche.
On that topic, chapter just titled "A Duel in a Bedroom." So, during this armistice,
I love this chapter so much.
the image is amazing for it. Do you want to give the recap of this one?
Absolutely. Let me get to the chapter real quick because we're skipping over quite a bit in order to get there. So they're in the city of Paris. He is with two beautiful sisters, El dos hermosas hermanas, which were so faultlessly lovely. I could not make up my mind which one to admire the most. So he's got Nina and Rosita. One is a singer and one has these lovely bedroom eyes. But anyways, he's out on duty, and then all of a sudden, he walks into the bedroom, hopefully to get his chance to lay them. My two charmers were in bed, but not alone. The black, shaggy head of a Mexican lay on the pillow between the raven tresses of Rosita and Nina. I recognize the invader as Juan Antonio, a renegade who acted as a guide to our army. Overcome with emotions, I was about to retire with becoming modesty when the voluptuous rascal sprang up and, drawing a machete from under his pillow and wrapping his blanket around his left arm, rushed me like some wild beast. The fastidious young ladies, instead of fainting and screaming, called for Antonio to kill the big fool. And we get this lovely image from Chamberlain, which I hope will hopefully be put on screen when we talk about this, where he is in his dress uniform, saber in hand, fighting a barely dressed, soy jack looking Mexican with his sword against his machete, and these two women are basically naked in bed. And it's just an outstanding little fight. But yeah, he stabs him, or he slashes his leg, and he is bleeding profusely. So he has become the soy jack very quickly, because he says, quote, "How cheering to myself with the words of my darlings, but I did not lose heart, finally succeeding at giving my antagonist an ugly slash across one of his bare legs, causing him to drop his knife when I gave him a point in a part that made him howl with agony that would cause him to lose the regards of dos Margaritas." Yeah, gave him a point in a part that made him howl. So I'm like, he probably stabbed him in the dick or something.
The another note about this is that this is just like a tone thing. Let's see. The beauties delighted to curl my long hair and would spend hours fixing it to suit their tastes. But on my return to camp, I would find that I was guilty of abducting many of the inhabitants of the place, for, alas, my charmers, like all Mexicans, raised large stocks of piojos, lice, not for only for home consumption, but for distribution among their friends. So
yes,
this that's one of the ways that Chamberlain, sort of
Just casually
he
racist.
just writes these backhanded jokes, right? He's just like, I abducted many of the inhabitants because these bitches gave me fucking head lice.
yeah, lice. Yeah. I love that paragraph. And talking about his curls, just imagine these two little Mexican girls playing with this Aryan giant curls, and they sleep with the scout, who comes back, by the way. The guy who he stabs here is going to be a recurring character. Not a lot. He'll come back at least once more towards the end. Which a lot of these people do, actually. He has I talked about like economy of characters in fiction before, but like in his storytelling, he will reference particular people, and you'll be like, oh my god, that guy again, even though it's supposedly all true. I believe it largely is. I think he probably hams it up a little bit. Yeah, that chapter is amazing.
It's a great
and
chapter.
with some characters, like one of the Texas Rangers, who nearly gets killed by the Mexican army because like he's been a Texas Ranger for a long time and been fucking with the Mexicans for a long time. You know, he runs away, and Chamberlain says, "Oh, you know, he eventually came back to the United States. I mean, he did lose an arm and all. And I wonder if he's alive. But you know what? He was a good guy." And that's the end you hear of that guy, basically. Like, Chamberlain will have this great side character. You say, oh yeah, he lost an arm. I don't know if he's dead or not. But yeah, he was a cool guy. And just completely continue on in the story.
Well, plus you also have the very early on as they're marching into Mexico, you also have the run-in with the Apaches. They're like, they hate the Texans, but they would happily also kill Mexicans for us if we gave them guns, money, and paid them in scalps. And the general is like, no. And if we see you harass the Mexicans, we will be honorable about it and kill you first. Yeah. Because listen, like, we may be fighting the Mexicans here, but you savages get the gun first.
Yeah.
Oh, and he whips him too. I think he whips the leader.
Well,
yes,
he was also like, you know, you're not. I'm not going to have you terrorizing the innocent civilians, which is honorable, right? Like, you know,
both armies actually, like the army regulars, are depicted pretty honorably. Actually, like the Mexicans as well. Like their officers are pretty well in command and like gentlemanly, and the American regulars are pretty good. It's the guerrillas and the volunteers that are just
absolutely
insane. Yeah. Yes, and the guerrillas. I'm actually curious if anyone knows more context than what's in the book, or maybe it's in the notes in the version you read, Pruden and Gabe. Does it give any more, I guess, information on how they were organized or run? Was this really just ragtag like bandits, or is it just militias?
It's a mixture of militias and bandits.
Yeah, basically
so they
militias.
were like, you know, both.
That was my reading, but it sounded like there wasn't any like high org, because he talked about like gangs, like was it the Carles gang?
Well, they're partisans, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just
like lawless.
It's gangs, but it's guerrilla warfare. You had guerrilla and what's known as also ranchero warfare. So, like, yeah, there was a lot of, you know, of course we're focusing mainly on the regulars here, but these encounters are the unconventional military engagement. So by partisans, by rancheros and others like it. And so this was irregular warfare. This wasn't just against standing militaries, but you're also in a foreign country. And you don't know who to trust, and some people are fine, but also, as we see throughout Chamberlain's stories, that some of these guys are recurring characters as well, of people that he's ran into and have either, you know, helped him or helped him escape getting killed on more than one occasion. And they are obviously just part of fighting back in ways that aren't with the military. I mean, they're insurgents, but they're repelling an invading force, which is the Americans. But, I mean, the things that Chamberlain describes are pretty damn harsh. There's, I believe, a white woman, or just a woman in general, who he finds in the hands of one of these groups of people that they... he uses polite language about it, but basically that this, like, gang of people rape her and then cut off her ears.
Yeah.
And he rescues her and takes her back to camp for the doctor to heal her. And then he just casually says, yeah, a little sleep will help her recover.
Yeah. From
obviously the most traumatic shit possible.
And then he brings her to a brothel where she like hides her maiming with her hair. And becomes very popular.
I think that might even
and he's like, that's
a different girl
for her.
That's a happy ending.
I think it's happened to like a dozen girls, because I think you're talking about two different ones that got their ears chopped off. It was like a thing they did with the women in particular. Like there's a lot of gang rapes actually. From the volunteers on the American side, one or two that Chamberlain will interrupt as we go too.
A lot of rape in a savage war.
Yeah,
you're telling me this for the first time.
Is very consistent that he is against these, and his euphemism is outrage. He's against all of these outrages because everyone he meets consents. Like Every woman he meets wants to marry him.
Samuel Chamberlain was a yes means yes kind of rogue.
Yeah, he has 10 charisma. Of course, every woman wants
10 charisma and 10 luck. This is the ultimate New Vegas build.
He basically is a New Vegas protagonist. Like, yeah, you're right. Every almost a vast majority of the women, he doesn't even say the first word. They're basically throwing themselves at him. Basically,
yeah.
That feel when over 6 foot.
It's height privilege. It really is. Height privilege.
I can only imagine. I mean, modern Mexicans are still pretty short guys. I can only imagine what sort of like manlet rage was happening in the first half of the 19th century. Like it had to be horrible. I mean, if you look at any of the illustrations, like the greasers are short as fuck.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they are
I know,
even still
I
to
know.
this day.
Yeah, I know.
It's I'm not a particularly tall gentleman. I'm like 5'10", but it's just like, are you serious? Like, I can walk around El Paso and be taller than all of these people, and it's like, imagine how it must have been to like try and fight in a duel against Samuel Chamberlain, 6'3", gray eyes, pale skin, long hair. And good luck, right? Like you're not going to make it.
Yeah, probably
it's over
8 inches of reach on you too. Just
yeah.
That's why he won all the time.
It was already a trained fighter thanks to his gymnasium education, and now he knows how to fight with a sword and a carbine. Like it's over, man. Just redact.
The Battle of Buena Vista was just them trying to get like higher up for the photo. They're just trying to get one step up and stand on their tiptoes.
They're like, if we can have the superior elevation, we will look taller in the daguerreotype of this war. We need to be height maxing, like the.
That's why it's all the song and dance, because they had to do the whole parade. Yes, the Stone Cold Americans, they don't have to do the whole parade thing. They have to just be there completely silent. It's the Mexican army. They have to do the whole song and dance in order to hype themselves up.
Just a side note, guys, for timing, so we're pretty far in terms of time. I'm thinking you want to just do up to or just shortly after the Battle of Buena Vista, and then we can call it there and say there'll be some kind of part 2 that will be more like my heckin'. We
should do the whole Buena Vista battle, because that chapter itself is great.
Yeah, I think that would be a good breaking point, or like the maybe 1 or 2 chapters after, something like that. Whatever feels natural. Is there?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Is there anything else, Cap, that you would want to cover before the Battle of Buena Vista?
No, we're good.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this does have some of the because there's also the stuff at Monterey too, because you have all the fighting at the Battle of Monterey that have these great full illustration paintings that he does. San Jeronimo Ranch, the Grand Plaza at Monterey, where the fighting and the parading is happening. The Irish Catholics who are hanged as well. So I think there's just a lot of good stuff there too. But the peace celebration that comes afterward, all of this is fantastic. I'm sorry,
that's why it's so hard.
This is such it's such a great part of American history that we just don't talk about anymore. But it's so good.
I don't know much about it because in
good.
school, public school and college, I don't think I learned anything beyond the dates and the name of the Mexican-American War. It is just, you get so much Revolutionary War, and then you skip to like the 70s pretty much. It was so scant. So
yeah, because like the Battle of Buena Vista skips over chapters regarding the Alarm of the Volunteers, the Ghost Story, which is like the most. It's a great one-off, which maybe we could talk about there. I mean, you also have the capture of Major Gaines' command, and of course, you've got also all sorts of wonderful names in here of American history. You have Captain William J. Heddy, who then takes over from Major John P. Gaines, who becomes governor of Oregon. You have Captain Cassius Marcellus Clay, distant kinsman of the distant kinsman of Henry Clay, He was a friend and supporter of Abraham Lincoln, a well-known Kentucky abolitionist writer, and was later appointed the minister to Russia, who would help with William Seward and the purchase of Alaska. But again, all these names that if you don't know anything about American history, I would really recommend just take 5 random names that you see through this book, and like I think Cap said at the beginning, they all have Wikipedia pages, and they all have lives and memoirs that you should read. Because as young as America is in comparison to our European friends, this text is so rich of a first-hand account of a war that is so consequential to like how our border is with Mexico and our eventual expansion westward. Like, Polk is a radical expansionist, and the American public is actually not as gung-ho as he is about expanding this whole Manifest Destiny idea. And it's not until after we win this war that we really, go westward, young man. Because even the Texas Revolution itself, too, right? Like, a lot of this is brought on by Mexico, because Texas is not as well settled as other parts of Mexico is, so they start allowing white settlers to come in and cultivate the Texians, and then all of a sudden they realize that we can do this stuff better than our own, and then the Texas Revolution kicks off. But, everything that we see from Chamberlain's point of view is just these first-hand accounts of the changing of guard, the changing of hands, and how to handle, just wartime in a war that the American public is not 100% for.
Yeah. And it even touches on, like these sort of ancillary conflicts, like the regulator-moderator war in the no man's land between Louisiana and Texas, and the...
Oh yeah, he brings that up actually.
Yeah, from Clanton's history, but the settlement of California from like both Mexican and the American settlers in the later portion of the story, and this I don't know if diaspora is necessarily the right word, but this spread of
the California fever.
Yeah, just the spread of contact in these regions, and the politics between the Mexicans, the Texas Republic, the Americans, and the various native tribes, and the conflicts between the tribes. You just have completely different interactions based on which tribe happens to be in whatever valley you're in at the time. It's just an underappreciated period of American history.
And there's so many stories too. Like he crams. Like we're skipping a lot, and when I mean a lot, I mean like a lot. Like there's so many like local folk stories he has, and stories of other people's stories. Like this Mexican town was named so and so because a Catholic priest tricked the devil, into giving him a gold mine, and he threw holy water on him. And there's so and Ben McCullough appears, and it turns out he's like a serious Texas Ranger who knew David Crockett. And the good thing about the footnote edition, which sadly, of course, the dissident press sadly does not have footnotes, is like when they first crossed the El Paso River. Now, of course, the Rio Grande, sorry. And the Rio Grande was actually far deeper and bigger at the time. You're like, oh yeah, by the way, Robert E. Lee was there too, and they helped them cross the river.
Yeah, as an engineering captain, Robert E. Lee was a participant in the Mexican-American War with the Corps of Engineers, and I think at this point he's like a relatively recent West Point graduate, if I recall correctly. And he's leading the charge, right, to help construct ways and means to get the guns, the horses, and the men over it. Because the footnote, I think, says it's like the Rio Grande is, I want to say, like 30 yards across, and it's like over 4 feet deep. So there's no way you're getting everyone through that. And it's not like today. The Rio Grande.
Yeah, it was a lot deeper back then.
Rio Grande is kind of a joke. Because I lived in El Paso for some time, and it's not much. And if you're lucky, if you get over into the outside of Las Cruces, and you can go to where when it floods, you can sometimes fish there or do like tubing and stuff, but it's not what it once was. And you can tell by the land itself that this was a much wider river and not under the kind of water control and regulation that it is today. But it's, again, these great pieces of history. And the footnotes are really worth it. I like you, Alaric. We're mutuals. You're great stuff. But you should have kept the footnotes, because everyone should do more reading on their history and research. And if you're running, I say this with love, but if you're going to run like a historical revisionist or just a historical journal, keep the footnotes for whatever you publish.
Yeah, and we had a postscript. I don't know if you guys had, but it summarized some of the information you shared at the intro, Prude. But actually, I think that would have been more helpful context for me starting the story as well. That'd be my feedback as someone publishing this.
Yeah, so you don't get the blue balled with the ending.
You know to expect it, or at least. I do want to cover this ghost story though before we get into the battle, because it's so well done. I want to read at least like 2 excerpts from it. So the setting is they're actually on. I believe they're moving towards Buena Vista, and he's on picket duty, where essentially you're almost this advanced border guard, not like a sentry at the edge of the thing, but you're like actually 5 miles out or some distance away, forming a picket line of sentries. So sort of imagine just being out in the middle of Mexico in the middle of the night in a desert, and you could have to hear noises. He describes in great detail hearing these strange in the gloomy woods, the trees ground and rubbed together, producing a strange, unearthly noise. The sighing and soughing of the wind among the pines seemed like a moaning of despairing spirits. And, he talks on this for a page or two, just describing this sort of eerie feeling he would get at night sometimes. And this particular instance, he describes seeing a figure moving. And it goes way further than I thought it would. So let me just read ahead. He approaches this strange figure that he sees moving in the distance. I started down to meet it, when the fact that the advanced figure raised no dust caused me to hesitate in wonder. On it came until I could make out a figure of a man. What resembled a well-got-up scarecrow broke loose from some Yankee cornfield and taking a promenade out in Mexico for the fun of the thing. Its method of locomotion was peculiarly its own. It revolved like a top in the most unaccountable and mysterious manner. And then the horse is terrified, and he describes it a little bit more as this, to be a man dressed in the stereotyped stage costume of an English clodhopper, a slate-colored smock frock, knee breeches, hobnailed shoes, and a slouch felt hat. Its hair was long and tow-colored, and the face, no tongue can describe the awful ghastliness of the features, the terrible despair that glared from its stony eyes. It was horrible and unearthly. And not only do they see it, they shoot this thing. He rounds up the boys, and they shoot this. He claims they shoot this spirit, and their bullets pass right through it. And they've just basically just kind of like, okay, let's just let it go. It's something from another world.
Not even shoot it. They try to fucking stab it.
Yeah, they ride alongside it.
Yeah, they encounter a skinwalker, and he writes the first creepypasta.
It is such a good creepypasta. I was chilled by this.
I was spooked. Yeah.
No, because it starts off great too. Because he sees out the corner of his eye, he sees something moving. He's like, "Oh, is that like a guy?" He says it's like it must be some guy who lost his horse, right? Because it's a figure walking around. Like, why would a guy just randomly walking?
He describes it as like shambling, walking improperly. Yeah. Yeah.
Like a twirling scarecrow demon.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he initially walks away. At first, he says, "You know what? Fuck this." He walks away. He nopes out at first, but he's like, "You know what? No, I'm not a bitch. I'll force my horse to go do it." It escalates. He shoots it. He then calls the boys to shoot it some more. And then one of the Irishmen, I think, says he recognizes him. Like, it's my friend, like Tom McCormick or something. And he tries talking to him. And the scarecrow does make eye contact with him and scares this man shitless. Because basically it confirms that he will die. And he does get sick the very next day. And I think that's the last we actually hear of them, so...
Yeah. Such a good... I mean, another American classic, ghost story. But, yeah, I love...
Out of the blue, too.
Yeah, it really is just like if we had a great narrative of the war and then all of a sudden, oh, by the way, here's this time I ran into a ghost and it scared the shit out of everybody that I knew because we realized these aren't Mexicans. This is something otherworldly.
Yeah.
A Wendigo. No, the thing is, they get their booze taken up.
Yeah, they get in trouble because they insist they report it.
Yeah, we promise you we're not drunk, but also, yeah, Gorman caught one look at the thing's fearful eyes and turned pale and yelled out, a ghost, and then went off at a run, followed by all but 4. We laid several plans to bring the thing to terms. We formed about 100 yards off and charged on it, but our horses, they would not, that would dash on a line of bayonets, would wheel within a few yards. We tied our lassos together with a horseman at each end, rode around it, and pulled the rope tight, which passed through the figure without disturbing it in the least. We fired volleys again and again into it. The bullets would pass through, knocking up dust on the plain beyond. Finally, getting desperate, Jack Decker, Happy Jack from Company A, and myself dismounted and dashed on it with our saber blades, passed through the object, while Happy Jack, who closed with the figure, was whirled off his feet and thrown to the ground. And they report this, like you said. They're not drunk. At nowhere does any point does Sam even say that he had been drinking during this entire run-in. But basically, the canteens were closely inspected after this, any strong liquors confiscated. And there we were troubled no more by whirling, twisting ghosts of Tim McCarthy's and Zacatecas Pass. Which makes it sound like, yeah, these guys got fucked up, but he swears up and down he wasn't.
Yeah, and he readily admits to being shit-faced at multiple other points, so... why would he lie here?
I feel like we have a pretty reliable narrator.
Super reliable. All those women judged him to be trustworthy and attractive. So how could we doubt the judgment of all of the ladies?
And modest. Don't forget the modest part.
When you're 6'3", they let you do it. When you're a white Chad in Mexico for 6 foot on these greasers, they let you do it. That could be the title for this one.
Anything else leading up to Buena Vista? If not, we can dive into Buena Vista because that's a good chunk right there.
That's actually the ghost story is a great palate cleanser to actually Buena Vista.
I mean, we should just make we should move on to Buena Vista, but just to make it clear to the listeners, this book is most of the chapters are roughly sequential and have their own self-contained narratives. I mean, a lot of these are vignettes, though there is, of course, the war is progressing in the larger view. So there are all of these small internal narratives that we would never have a chance to cover this entire book. But it is
20 hours.
Very, very, very much worth a read.
Absolutely,
every chapter's a banger.
I mean, like we're skipping over like the burning of Agua Nueva as well. Yeah. But yeah, we're getting straight into the battle. Washington's birthday, February 22nd, is 1847, and we're getting ready to go on to the Battle of Buena Vista, and all of the everyone's getting ready for battle. We open up letting us know that the surgeons are getting all of their tables ready for operation, and by operation we mean we're going to be amputating a lot of limbs, because you're getting hit with mini ball that is basically, sometimes 0.57, 0.58, 0.60 caliber, and this is not like what we have today. This thing is just going to rip a fucking limb off, and it's important to consider that. But this is where we were joking earlier about the ethnic humor, right? Like, so a German surgeon in the Mexican service and has a letter from Santa Anna. You are surrounded by 20,000 men and cannot in any human probability avoid suffering around and being cut to pieces with your troops. But as you deserve consideration and particular esteem, I wish to save you from a catastrophe, and that for the purpose to give you this notice in order that you may surrender at discretion, under the assurance that you will be treated with consideration belonging to the Mexican character, to which end will be granted an hour's time to make up your mind and to commence from the moment when my flag of truce arrives in your camp. With this view, I assure you my particular consideration. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. General Taylor, getting on the purport of Santa Anna, replied, "Tell Santa Anna to go to hell," and turning to his chief of staff said, "Major Bliss," where Fort Bliss is named after, "put that in Spanish and send it back by this damned Dutchman."
I know the great joke is that he sends a translation. Basically just says, you know what, at this time, we must decline.
Yes. Yeah, he the translator edits it for posterity.
Yeah, to add a little more of sincerity to it, rather than old Zach. He's called Old Zach multiple times. Zachary Taylor. And this is where the Jefferson Davis cameo comes in. By the way,
multiple. It is kind of funny that Chamberlain effectively tells on historical figures multiple times. He is not charitable to Zachary Taylor, really. Like, Zachary Taylor does not come off as being a reasonable or skillful general in this narrative. He's just kind of like demanding and
Grumpy.
ready to fight and very unstrategic.
Very bullhead. Like he likes wool.
He does, yeah. He likes wool. He likes most of his direct superiors. But the ones who have him beaten multiple times generally don't get a favorable review. Graham specifically, yeah.
And there's this wonderful footnote where he even gives Wool credit for Buena Vista, because he says it's Wool's idea to stay and it was Taylor's idea to flee. But the footnote says that he actually got it backwards. It was Taylor's the one who said fuck no and dug his heels in, and it was Wool who wanted to bitch out and basically retreat. Well, later on, during because it goes very badly for them for a long while. Like it doesn't even go back and forth. Like they start losing almost immediately. Like the Mexicans pushing on them hard, and then they start flanking them. It's only with the artillery. Like it's literally they had to rely on artillery to save their asses, basically, and just keeps pounding at them again and again and again. And the misses what's it called?
Most of this becomes an artillery fight. Like at 10 a.m. the firing was confined to mostly artillery and skirmishers. Lieutenant Sitgreaves, an engineer officer, took charge of a 6-pounder and was throwing shells among the enemy light troops. And Lieutenant O'Brien, also has a footnote here. John Paul Jones O'Brien, a West Point graduate and a veteran of the Seminole War. He was breveted a major for his conduct during the Battle of Buena Vista. Like, you just have all these great footnotes of history that you can look up. His section was playing on the heavy masses of the foe at the foot of the mountain. To rest our horses, we had dismounted, taking a rest on the ground, when someone said, cried out, "Look thar!" And not more than 50 yards from in front of our little white things were apparently crawling all around the ground. All doubts of their character were cleared up by seeing a forest of glistening tubes, the showy caps, and the dark, fierce faces of the Mexican infantry rising out of the little ravine. Santa Anna had sent an entire division through the gulches without being discovered, and it came near proving fatal to us. And so, already we were beginning to see the battle firsthand by a guy who was there, and it's really great stuff.
And it's brutal too. Like he basically is completely chaos, and this is before it starts. Like, this is day one. I think the battle takes at least 2.5 days, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, at this point, there's a battle, and they retreat to regroup, and the dragoons don't get to sleep for like 3 days in a row. They're just constantly back and forth and in the field and sitting in mud
and chasing down volunteers too.
Right.
Like, there's a whole part where they're, as like a policing action, they're rounding up people. What was it? I should have highlighted. There's a line of like every wounded man would have like 10, generous, kind-hearted volunteers trying to carry him to the back.
And carrying his hat too.
Carrying his hat, and then the dragoons had to push him back at sword point.
Yeah, to keep them in line.
Yeah, the bravery on both sides is crazy. Because there's this one, it's an Irishman, Mick something. He is the lone artilleryman. Like all the other people, like all the other guys retreat, and he is there just firing at the Lancers. He just keeps on firing over and over and over. He is injured, and he's still firing at them. He basically has to be dragged. It's literally only his artillery bombardment is that they were able to maintain their formation.
Yeah, and everyone, so he's like moving these guns back like 10 feet to slowly retreat while they're still firing. And I mean, these I mean, they're called howitzers at the time, but I mean, these are cannons. These are cannons that you load from the front, you pack in your charges, and they're throwing in, shot and cannonballs and rocks and random bullshit just to keep throwing projectiles at the Mexican lines. And I mean that,
and I mean, like,
they basically.
One of the things too with like we mentioned O'Brien too, and like his guns is that he is basically just taking on as much as he can with respects to just advancing Mexican forces. So all of a sudden, you have O'Brien and Thomas's guns and 2 Illinois and a Kentucky regiment under John J. Hardin. Of course, Hardin dies here, but Santa Anna renews the attack at 5 o'clock in the afternoon with artillery support. And those guns, those what are they, 8 or 6 pound guns? They're just like constantly firing into these main positions because they're right there at the front. That's the main position where these men are at. Yeah. And you're dealing with canister and grape shot. And you've got Captain Braxton Bragg as well, and where Fort Bragg was. I think they just recently changed the name of Fort Bragg as well, the military base that's named after him. God, fucking bastards! But yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic order of battle, and we get a first-hand account.
Yeah,
really, it's Fort Liberty now.
Soulless.
Yeah,
God, we're turning into Super Earth every day.
What original name?
Yeah, what an original name. But yeah, and of course Henry Clay Jr. dies. But this battle is just to give you like the numbers that we do have. His strength is less than 5,000 men. Zachary Taylor. There's over 15,000 troops. Santa Anna has. American losses, 267 killed, 387 wounded, 6 missing, although that source is somewhat disputed. Mexican losses, 591, 1,048 wounded, over 1,800 missing. So it's an American tactical victory.
And this is when what they call the Mississippi Rifles. They're like also the elite squad. I believe they're actually they're Deford Davis's division too. I think partly the reason why they call them Mississippi Rifles is his doing. Actually, I think it was his idea because they use a different kind of rifle. I looked into it there. They use a slightly new model of rifle, if I recall correctly, and they're going at it too. And it's very amusing when you have the idea of he had to stop writing this book because of the Civil War. Right, it was literally 1861. He was called to duty that's why my confession is unfinished. And then you see Jefferson Davis pop out, and he's like, Jefferson Davis, noble, righteous, and unlike anything, striking like lightning, energetic. And Davis actually does get down, by the way. He is going at it during this battle. Like he is in the front lines too. Like. Taylor, everyone.
No, I was going to say, it adds such historical context. When people talk about it being brother versus brother in the Civil War, and nowadays people are like, oh, how could, they treat General Lee or whoever with respect, even though he was their foe. But yeah, like to your point, Gabe, 15 years earlier, these guys were, falling side by side. A lot of these guys are former soldiers from this war, probably. Like they literally knew each other.
Blood brothers, basically.
Yeah.
Like it's literally crazy to think about. Like this is basically like this is a tragedy, right? You this beautiful the Battle of Buena Vista, this little moment of the Texas-American War, we see it as glorious, right? It's a glorious expansion of America, but in a lot of ways, it is a beginning of a grand tragedy.
Yeah, it's America's Battle of Naboo.
Texas.
God damn it!
Oh my god!
Oh my god! Oh, delete yourself.
That's staying in.
We're officially. We're officially.
You have
that's
boosted
peak
cringe.
millennial insight right there.
We're Reddit certified now.
Oh my god!
You got the Reddit gold, sir. Yeah.
Thanks for the Aztec gold, kind stranger.
Oh my god.
I don't want to be a
I'm throwing in my Tugger hat. This is it.
He's all tugged out, damn it. Tugged him out.
I'm sorry. I am just being a distracting feature now. You guys are really making good progress on this battle, and I'm just shit posting.
Thanks for the reinforcement.
Thanks for the positive reinforcement there.
Yeah.
Thanks for your AP psych lesson.
But it is, to your point, Gabe. Yeah, it is a tragedy because a lot of these men knew each other and had great affection and respect for each other. As this book captures as a time capsule of that interwar period, even if there were tensions between, politically between them.
It's tragic. There's a sense of the comical, and for example, they actually box. He actually boxes one of a good portion of Santillana's army inside a ravine, and it's basically shooting ducks in a barrel. But they bring up the white flag, and General Wool, being an honorable man, he says, "Okay, stop, ceasefire." Okay.
Did you just say shooting ducks in a barrel?
I didn't catch that one.
It's shooting fish in a barrel, or they were sitting ducks. I want to help you since you're an ESL, Gabe. I just want
favorite
to let you
greaser.
know those are the
greaser.
those are the idioms. Yes.
The little greaser's got to learn his English. Thank you for helping him out.
I'm pretty sure it'll be very easy to shoot ducks in a barrel too. Damn it!
They wouldn't. If you're in a barrel, right? You're pretty confined.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but the Mexicans had a heavy battery of 3 guns manned by Irish deserters from our army. These desperados were organized as a battalion known as the Battaglia San Patricio, or the Legion of St. Patrick. The commander was the notorious Riley, who was ranked as a colonel in the Mexican army. A beautiful green silk banner waved over their heads. On it glittered a silver cross and a golden harp embroidered by the hands of the fair nuns of San Luis Potosi. The deserters pitched their shells into every part of the field, some bursting in the road a good mile to our rear. General Taylor ordered Lieutenant Rucker to take that damned battery. The old gentleman was sometimes slightly profane. Now the order was very... Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to make a joke with the St. Patrick guys with the flag. It reminds you of that what's so right Armand.
Oh yeah, tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day.
It sure is.
Oh yeah, this is our holiday special, right? No, I was going to make a joke this is their future Compact Magazine subscribers. This is Sarad Armani's Lady of This is the post-liberal,
the future Patrick Deneen's of the world.
No, that's Patrick Deneen's ancestor right there, fighting the Americans with his Catholic brothers.
And then, are we ready to move on to the night after? Do you have anything else on the battle itself? He has a summary of just some of the people that passed away. I just want to. You guys already mentioned Colonel Henry Clay, but he really went out very, very honorably. Basically, he was shot in the leg. Henry Clay Jr. And he just said, "Point, twist me around."
Bayoneted.
Then he said, "Just point me at them with a sword in my hand." And and they just left him in the field because they couldn't carry him. And
right. Very honorable. He's got his cuck legs. He can't walk anymore. He says, "Listen, give me my pistol to my father." I'm pretty sure his father would have sufficed with a sword. Yeah. At least with a pistol, he could probably took out a guy or two.
Yeah.
But no, he decides to literally...
He knew his time was there.
An ending. Guy with the cuck legs loses in the end. Yeah.
There are so many stories like this, though, in war that just don't... that are very heroic, that don't... I mean, we Henry Clay Jr., right? He's the son of Henry Clay, right? One of the most famous... just one of our famous early American politicians, and it's just sort of important to consider that as well. There are numerous times where sons of American statesmen and officials do go out and battle. I think the son of a president died in World War I, and I'm trying to remember which one. We're going to look it up.
It was either Roosevelt's,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, Quentin Roosevelt died.
Yes.
And he was in the Army Air Service when he had died, and when they had found him, his corpse, and they took some pictures of it, and his plane crashed, and the thing they were going to sell it as postcards, but even the Germans were like, no, we're not going to do that. They gave him full military honors when he was buried. I mean, the same thing has happened with other leaders and statesmen who have fought in these kind of conflicts, and it's really sort of depressing to know that doesn't exist anymore. There's a made-for-TV movie with Sam Elliott and a few others about the Rough Riders. So just like, 40 years after this conflict. And there's this line at the beginning of the movie where there's these like young college age graduate New Englander types, and they have this beautiful line that always sticks with me. And he says, "It is the role of the patrician class to lead the plebeians into battle, for it is our responsibility and our noblesse oblige," or something along those lines. And it's just like, I know it's for a movie, but no one talks like that anymore about our statesmen and our leadership. Like, no one believes in that. And you see these guys who are fighting for God and country and for America and their ideas as a people. And yeah, Henry Clay Jr. goes down swinging, and
it would be the equivalent of like Colin Powell's son going into war.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it would be exactly like that. Or it'd be like it would be like I don't know, like one of, none of a lot of these people don't have sons anymore. You notice
that? I was
thinking of
Obama.
That,
maybe Michael could go in to serve on their behalf, but
right. It would be like if Barron Trump were to like become a cavalry officer and work with Eric Prince or something cool like that. It'd be. I can only get so erect, but it's a dream that used to be the reality.
A little bit, Prude, because we do have Yeb with his guac bowls, so that's kind of the Chamberlain legacy to an extent. Yeb Bush is the closest.
No, Yeb's a traitor.
That doesn't count.
Yeah, Yeb's a traitor. No, it doesn't count. Because if Samuel Chamberlain did not marry any of his Mexican brides,
that's true.
He just consummated. He just consummated.
Purely marriages of the soul.
Yeah, marriages of the soul.
El Tuerto, you son of a bitch.
So we're obviously going to just cover. This is basically the first half, which is honestly
and we've skipped so much.
We've already skipped so much, and I think it'll be a good break-off point. We'll wrap up with 1 or 2 points on it. But the first half is also the most narrative. Like, this is almost like much more novel. Like, Cap, you had pointed out how there's like all these little side stories and great little vignettes in it, which is true in this part. But the second half is like 90% vignettes in comparison. And then there's like a more narrative final part. So I think this will be good because we covered really like the charge of like him growing up very quickly for a few years. There's the invasion and then this great battle. And then following this, it's much more, he's a member of under General Wool's occupation force. And there's a lot of insane stuff going on as they're occupying this territory, as some more major battles happen. But a lot of the really heavy action, military history action is happening more to the south, to Mexico City. And, I think on the far west coast, I think there's some stuff going on. I am not a Mexican history buff, but I think we'll separate it because our plan is to maybe do another one of these, and hopefully more people will have read it by then because it's an amazing book. We can just really hit some of those amazing vignettes that define the second half.
The vignettes are strongest part.
They're incredible. And then the one thing I just want to make sure we covered on this one was the Great Western, I believe the woman's name is, who relates to the battle. Cap, do you want to regale us with the tale of the Great Western?
All right. So after the battle, when they are beginning to go into the California territory, which is Mexican California, like it's south of the modern day borders. This woman named Sarah with many last names. But at the time she's referred to as Sarah Borginis, is called the Great Western. And she was basically she was basically a camp follower. Like, she would set up brothels and restaurants all over the place.
Doing the needful.
Doing the needful. And whoever caught her eye. And so she blows into camp and is like, I need a husband because legally I can't go into the California territory unless I'm married. And like a random guy ends up saying, yeah, sure. Like, I'll tie the knot. And she has there's this amazing quote attributed to her that is, hold on. Sorry, I got to find it.
Here it is. I got you.
Okay,
Cap.
great.
So I'll read the paragraph and then we'll get to it. Her example seemed contagious. Just as we were ready to start the next morning of a train of 3 large Chihuahua wagons came in sight around the bend of the road of Obispado, preceded by a horsewoman who was all recognized as Sarah Borginas, celebrated the Great Western. She rode up to Colonel Washington and asked for permission to accompany the expedition. The colonel referred to her as Major Rucker, who informed her that she would have to marry one of the dragoons and be mustered in as a laundress, be mustered in as a laundress she could go. Her ladyship gave the military salute and replied, "All right, Major, I'll marry the whole squadron, and you throw in, but when I go along."
Yes, riding along the front of the line, she cried out, "Who wants a wife with $15,000 and the biggest leg in Mexico? Come, my beauties, and don't all speak at once. Who's the lucky man?" And eventually, she finds Davis of Company E, and said,
the same man that flogged some guy earlier.
My wife. Right. "I have no objections to making you my wife if there is a clergyman here to tie the knot." And with a laugh, the heroine replied, "Bring your blanket to my tent tonight, and I will learn you to tie a knot that will satisfy you, I reckon."
Such was the morals of the army in Mexico.
Yes. So she and Chamberlain puts laundress in quotations. This is a historical figure, and she basically was known as this. Just I don't want to diminish her because I do like this story and I like this character, but it kind of a girl boss. She she does the work of a woman with the gusto of a man, and there are stories from later on in the Mexican or from earlier where she was referred to as the heroine of Fort Brown, where essentially she catered this siege and was carrying buckets of coffee to men on the wall. And kept everyone fed while there was cannon fire going around her, and allegedly, was helping reload rifles and things like that in between serving
to
meals.
feel a no siege wife.
Yes. And so she eventually ended up. Let's see. After she died, she went on many adventures of her own, and after she died, she was given the title of an honorary colonel, which is, a big accomplishment, especially for the
incredible
time period.
And is she the same person? Because I was thinking of an earlier incident. I'm actually not sure. I might be mixing 2 women together. The Yankee Delilah, who during the Battle of Buena Vista basically seduced...
Yankee girl in Mexico, yeah.
Yeah, seduced was he a colonel or a general, a leader of some lancers?
No, General Mignon, the Lion of Mexico.
The Lion of Mexico. And just basically banged him, and he showed up late, and he was supposed to do a flanking maneuver, and a pretty key... That's a different woman. Okay, so I was mixing those two up. But
the same person.
Dude, yeah. Yep. When we do the HBO miniseries of this, which I think... It's necessary. I'm not a TV head, but if we could do that, she can be a main character, and make her the on the cover.
Yeah, you got to get the funding by having a female character that isn't just a endless series of
she's a real girl boss.
Partners.
Dude, during the peak Rome era or Deadwood era of HBO, this would be a killer HBO series of that era.
If Deadwood had turned into an anthology series, this would have been an amazing.
Absolutely.
You could literally turn My Confession into kind of like a True Detective-esque kind of story. There are so many little vignettes here
so good.
that could be their own stories and characters that just deserve so much more attention. But in this period of Hollywood just requires podcasts like these to tell these stories, because Hollywood's never going to make cool stories about Samuel Chamberlain and laying pipe across the Great Old West.
There's enough good stuff in this that you could get 10 Blood Meridians worth of novels out of it. McCarthy could have picked virtually any 30-page section of this to write a novel.
Well, he chose the last 50, so
I mean, Blood Meridian's a banger. Let's not discount.
No. I'm just saying that, like, based on what is the stuff in here that pretty clearly directly inspired McCarthy. And I mean, like, I'm not like a plot or a character head. Like, I really care about prose, and I care about the execution more than the, like,
my heckin' cliches
story.
My heckin' themes.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, I'm not in any way diminishing McCarthy because, he took some of the characters and events from this book for Blood Meridian. What I'm saying is that, someone of equal skill to McCarthy could have chosen a section of my confession basically at random and had enough material to do.
And that was before you guys hopped on. Me and Cap were just chatting, and my claim that I made was like, if hypothetically, if this guy came to me with this and said, will you publish? I was a publisher. Will you publish this? I would have said, it's great. Like, there's so much media. Let's break into 3 books, man. Let's make some money off this, because it's just so dense and it's well written. I'm not at all criticizing the style. But I was like, if anything, you could have just stretched it out and done even more with it.
Pad the word count a little.
I
think we got to get it up to like 900 pages. You just split it up. Maybe add a little.
We need the Wheel of
end.
Time model.
Don't just leave Judge Holden in the desert with the Indians. Let us know. Really, like, let us know what happens. Like, resolve that thread. Is really.
Do you imagine there's just 2 books of a Miss Tisa pulling her braid, like full Wheel of Time filler?
Oh my God! I hate Robert Jordan. Don't ever.
Yeah.
I make more Naboo references.
I'm just the schlock man. That's what I bring to this.
Oh my gosh!
God!
So keep it to Lucas, please.
Yeah. Hey, what if instead of just leaving him in the desert, he comes back years later and rapes him to death in an outhouse? I mean, I just think it would really.
Just imagine being in the editor's room, like, you're just sitting there and like at his desk, and he's like, "Listen, this is a great story, and I know that you're selling this as an autobiography, but did you fucking seriously, like, fight some weird Mexican guy with a knife in nothing but your underwear in front of, like, dozens of people, saved only by, like, some estranged Catholic priest?" Yeah, totally happened. Okay, great.
You really want to admit to all of these homicides?
You murdered all these people, but all these women said yes, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It is wild. Yeah, he literally, like, admits to a homicide later in this book. like he frames it in a pretty good way.
We've got scalping, we've got murder, we've got soldiering, but remember, all the ladies said yes.
All consensual, fully consensual, sir.
He is a gentleman.
Sweet Baby Ink. It's a yes means yes kind of plot line. Like, you can adapt it.
You joined a bandit gang and killed a bunch of Indians and Mexicans.
Yes.
And you're documenting that. Yes, sir. I'd like to get this published. Well, I guess it was in America at the time, so
just like Nutcranker, can't publish it. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
He was doing his duty.
Back when I did want to note, they do mention, Chamberlain does mention that Yuma, Arizona was at the time called Arizona City, and El Paso was at the time called Franklin City. So I don't know, they're changing it to the native names. Seems a little woke. Seems a little woke. Bring it back. El Paso is now Franklin City. Let's go for it. I'm referring to Yuma as Arizona City from now on. Not
310 to Arizona City.
Yes.
It doesn't have the same ring, to be honest.
Yeah. Anything? I want to try and put a bow on it.
In the West Texas town of Franklin. Okay.
The old West Texas town of Franklin.
Anything else? I guess we're going to reconvene at some point and do the sexier back half, which actually I think is actually the better part. Like, hopefully people thought this was fun and we'll pick it up, because I think the best is yet to come. I have so many notes and pages dog-eared of quotes I want to read.
As much as the last 80 pages are great, I think that if you really are wanting to appreciate a war that never gets talked about anymore, in part because I think everyone's kind of waiting for the Mexican-American War Part 2 to happen, but this is a great first-hand account. The narrative is there. You get to see the character and what the military life was like. I mean, this is a great, rich primary source document that, if even exaggerated or embellished in some places, is still a beautiful first-hand account of a war and a conflict and what America was like antebellum, and at a time of expansionism where in the back of your head it wasn't, the issues of like the antebellum South or slavery or whatever, like that's probably in the back of your head as you read this, but it's not mentioned at all. Like, this is a war against Mexico. This is during the time of James K. Polk, and this is the time when America was a different country and a different breed of people, as Mr. Chamberlain is 6'3", 16 years old, and fighting and swashbuckling with Mexicans, greasers, and, laying pipe with senoritas. Like, it's a different time. I quite like this because there's more narrative through line to it, and the rest are a little more vignette-like, and I like a good story. And so this is a great piece of history, but he's also just a fantastic storyteller. Like, this is the kind of man who I would want to drink with and listen to him regale me with stories about a war I was too young to remember.
God tier grandpa stories.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
I
killed 50 men, and you...
Really?
Tell me more.
I fucked 10 times more of that in women.
Dude, teaser, there's literally a Hitman, the video game Hitman type scenario later where Chamberlain is just taking dudes out and stashing them in a cornfield. It's pretty awesome.
Well done, 47.
Yeah, all right.
Look, kid, I'm just telling you, you got probably 40 aunts and uncles in Mexico. Not that you'll ever meet them, but I mean, just...
I wouldn't have made it happen without Seminics.
Oh, we didn't do any more reads.
Before we'd like to close with another ad read from our sponsor, Seminex. Seminex. Do you remember a simpler time before microplastics in your testicles? Before PFAS in every product? Seminex remembers. Seminex remembers being 6'3" and having sex with every woman it met. And you can have those memories too if you try Seminex. Seminex is produced from only the purest extract of Yankee Virility.
Thanks for the Aztec gold, kind stranger.